a cordial welcome from ISU's Strasbourg Central Campus here in beautiful Alsace. And today we will have a special day. It'll be a special afternoon. And one should mention that it's exactly 1400 hours Central European summertime here in Strasbourg. You will be the audience in the context of two interdisciplinary presentations this afternoon, team projects, and our students have been working on these team projects since last October. And they're quite different team projects, but both interesting, as you will see. The first team project, which will be presented today, is CDG, the Cosmic Development Goals, a common agenda for the future of space policy. And the ISU faculty interfaces are Professor Wootring and Dr. Fay. This team is composed of 14 young professionals, and they'll be providing mature interdisciplinary coverage of this project, which again goes back to last October. They've been working on it since last October and have made very, very decent progress. The second team project has 20 members, so it's a larger group, and it's devoted to Mars. It's called Fertile Mars, and they have proposed different methods to profitably extract useful materials from Martian minerals, most notably iron. At this point, it's worth mentioning that both teams have 1 hour to present, and following 1 hour's presentation, up to 30 minutes will be devoted to Q&A on the part of ISU's resident faculty. So at this point, it only remains for me to wish TP CDG very, very, very good luck.
Thank you, Professor Hill. I think, should I wait?
No, my laptop isn't muted, I apologize. It's muted. Oh, wait, yes. Yes, it is. You have to put the speaker volume also. Yeah, it is. Or to disconnect from my laptop. Don't join with the audio. Join again with no audio. It is muted. It is muted. The computer is muted. I checked. Disconnect from the video. You need to rejoin it with I did. See? Oh no. I still suggest you disconnect from the meeting. Rejoin it without the audio. You can start speaking.
Okay. When you hear space, what comes to mind? Maybe it's aliens, astronauts, or asteroids. Maybe it's billionaires like Elon Musk or rocket launchers making headlines. If you've been following the news, not just over the last few months, but even in the last few days, you'll know that space is a fast-paced, high-stakes industry. One where competition is growing, national interests are clashing, and private companies are pushing the boundaries faster than the rules can keep up. And when there's no clear, effective system of governance to guide how we explore and use space, things can get messy fast. Therefore, as humanity pushes the boundaries of our presence in the cosmos, we must confront a pivotal question. What are the core challenges that we are and will be facing in the exploration of space? And just as importantly, how can we ensure that effective, forward-looking policies are in place to guide decision makers along the way? Good afternoon, everyone here in person, and as well as those who are joining us online. I'm Jillian, and I'm joined on stage today by my teammates, Amy, Tessa, Zoe, and Claudio, as we share with you our answer to this urgent question. Our team of 14 international students from 12 countries representing disciplines in law, policy, engineering, science, and the humanities came together under the Master of Space Studies program at the International Space University to develop a framework that is visionary yet actionable. The outcome of that is the Cosmic Development Goals, or CDGs. The CDGs aim to guide and encourage the international community in responsible, sustainable, and equitable use of space in order to maintain space as a domain of opportunity, cooperation, and shared prosperity for all. Taking inspiration from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the CDGs set out 8 main goals with 165 supporting metrics to guide the future of space exploration. These goals are supported by an implementation plan designed to bring together governments, space agencies, private companies, academia, and the public, ensuring that progress is coordinated, inclusive, and sustainable. Each goal is broken down into specific outcomes and metrics organized across 3 timeframes. Short-term metrics, which are achievable within 10 years, focus on building strong foundations like new policies, capacity building, and inclusive dialogue. Mid-term metrics are to be achieved within 30 years, aiming for broader implementation, measurable impact, and global collaboration. And long-term metrics focus on ambitious, transformational changes to be achieved in 40 years and beyond, like new norms for planetary protection or fully decarbonized launch systems. While certain metrics are urgent and achievable now, others require sustained global effort over decades. The CDGs combine both quantitative targets, which can be measured, and qualitative targets, which focus on values like equity and inclusivity, all supported by research to ensure that they are both realistic and meaningful. This framework is accompanied by a glossary, a practical tool to refer to in cases where technical, philosophical, or sector-specific terms may be understood differently. The glossary is not meant to be a firm establishment of the definition of a term, but rather meant to clarify the scope which we intend to be understood in the application amongst all stakeholders and space participants. As we develop the messaging and implementation framework for the Cosmic Development Goals, 5 recurring and interconnected challenges emerged. First, there's a persistent gap in global space governance. While current treaties like the 1967 Outer Space Treaty provide a foundational legal framework, they fall short of addressing the realities of today's dynamic space ecosystem, particularly the rise of private space actors, space commercialization, emerging national programs, and dual-use technologies. Second, geopolitical tensions are deepening. Power asymmetries between dominant space nations and emerging space players make cooperation fragile and often transactional rather than collaborative. Third, equity and inclusion remains a major hurdle. Despite space being framed as a global commons, access to its benefits and influence over decisions remain far from equitable, especially for underrepresented and marginalized communities. Fourth, economic and technical barriers continue to widen the gap. High cost, unclear regulations, and limited transparency, especially from private actors, make it difficult for new entrants to compete or even participate meaningfully. And finally, we see a lack of coordinated standards and data sharing. As innovation outpaces regulation, risks grow without common protocols or ethical safeguards. As such, each goals are anchored in 6 core principles: transparency, diversity, accountability, adaptability, opportunity, and sustainability. These are not abstract values, but active responses to the systemic risk and obstacles highlighted. They served as rudimentary directives that shaped how the goals were framed, structured, and communicated. In this case, each goal becomes not only aspirational, but also grounded in coherent and responsible approach to the realities of space governance and the concurrent development of technologies and regulations. Now that we've outlined the challenges and principles behind the CDGs, we will take a closer look at the goals themselves.
As humanity moves toward more frequent, long-duration, and autonomous space missions, risks such as radiation exposure, microgravity effects, and mental health challenges become more pressing. Historically, human spaceflight has always carried a significant danger, with a 1.2% fatality rate per mission. Yet we still lack internationally standardized safety protocols. This creates disparities in protection depending on the mission operator or country. Moreover, many of the medical technologies developed for space, including telemedicine, remote diagnostics, and AI-driven health analytics, can offer powerful solutions for underserved populations on Earth. Thus, we begin with Cosmic Development Goal number 1, health and safety for space and Earth, which focuses on ensuring the well-being of all space participants, including astronauts, scientists, tourists, and workers, while also addressing global health equity on Earth. This development goal is grounded in the shared priorities of leading organizations around the world. NASA's Human Research Program and the Institute of Medicine have consistently underscored the complex health risks associated with human spaceflight, calling for stronger medical standards and preventive care. On a global scale, initiatives like United Nations Resolution 77-120 recognize the growing role of space science in supporting public health, advocating for greater collaboration between key institutions, such as the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, or UNOOSA, and the World Health Organization, or WHO. Therefore, this goal aims to promote universal health coverage for all space participants through common medical standards, develop international frameworks for cooperation in space health and safety, foster innovation in space-enabled health solutions, ensure equitable access to telehealth, especially in low-resource areas, and encourage preventative and proactive space medicine as a mission planning priority. In summary, CDG-1 is not just about keeping astronauts safe. It's about creating a bridge between space medicine and global health equity. Central to ensuring the health and safety of all space participants and the rest of the cosmic development goals lies CDG-2, which aims to establish space as a collaborative and cooperative domain to ensure mutually international partnerships, knowledge sharing, and inclusive capacity building. Historically, space activities evolved from geopolitical rivalries, such as the Cold War, to joint collaborative efforts, such as the Apollo-Soyuz test project and the International Space Station. But now, we face new dynamics. The rise of private new space actors and emerging space nations, growing competition over lunar and orbital resources, and the lack of global regulatory oversight for increasingly complex joint activities. Without a shared cooperative framework, there's a risk that powerful state or private actors could monopolize access to space, leaving others behind or indirectly increasing their barrier to entry. CDG-2 responds to this concern by calling for shared standards and global collaboration to prevent a future where space serves only a narrow set of interests. Despite existing regulations that govern international cooperation across many domains or industries in the world today, current frameworks in the space sector don't fully account for the diversity of today's space actors. We have identified 3 critical gaps. 1, while states have signed collaborative agreements like the Artemis Accords and ILRS, these still lack global regulatory teeth. The private sector is booming, but policy hasn't caught up, creating gaps in coordination, responsibility, and data sharing, a valuable tool in democratizing access to space resources. And most critically, many emerging nations still face significant barriers to entry, especially in access to knowledge, data, and infrastructure. This is why CDG-2 integrates concepts such as open science and capacity building as pillars of long-term cooperation. First, we focus on enhancing international collaboration. This begins with the establishment of a working group on space as a cooperative domain, tasked with maintaining momentum and accountability across nations, agencies, and sectors. We also propose the creation of global project protocols, standardized frameworks that streamline joint missions, reducing political and technical friction. And to drive transparency and measure progress, we introduce the International Collaboration Index, a benchmark tool to track how many nations and institutions are investing in shared efforts over solo ambitions. Second, we call for open science and data sharing. Here, the vision is simple. Space-derived knowledge should serve all of humanity. To that end, we recommend the development of a centralized open-source space data repository, open to academia, agencies, and the private sector. Third, and perhaps most crucially, we emphasize capacity-building efforts. For space to be truly collaborative, all actors must be empowered to participate. We propose a Cosmic Development Education Fund, aimed at supporting students and institutions in emerging space nations, as well as public-private partnerships for infrastructure development and technology transfer. Together, these pillars do more than just promote collaboration. They build the foundation for a future where space governance, knowledge, and opportunity are equitably shared.
Hello, everyone. Let me introduce CDG3, Orbital Conservation and Ethical Stewardship. This is a goal that addresses one of the most urgent and multifaceted challenges in modern space governance. Earth's orbital space is a finite and largely unregulated resource, and we're reaching a critical tipping point. Since 1957, over 9,000 satellites have been launched. Many are still active, but tens of thousands now drift as space junk. In fact, more than 100 trillion fragments of untracked debris now orbit our planet. Some are smaller than a paint fleck, but they can destroy billion-dollar infrastructure on impact. For example, just last year, NASA's timed satellite, TIMED satellite, came within 10 meters of a defunct Russian satellite, a near miss that echoed throughout the entire space community. Events like these, they're no longer rare. They're becoming increasingly common and dangerous, and the risks are growing. In 2024 alone, over 2,500 satellites were added to low Earth orbit, many as part of mega constellations. This explosive growth increases not just the risk of collisions, but also creates problems of interference, traffic congestion, and long-term sustainability concerns for orbital operations. But CDG3 isn't just about what happens in orbit. As we explore Mars and asteroids and icy moons, we're also facing growing concerns about forward and backward contamination risks. The upcoming Mars sample return mission, for example, has sparked renewed concern over bringing unknown biological material back to Earth, with there being no universal containment or sterilization protocols currently in place. And despite these escalating risks, we still lack binding international mechanisms to enforce responsible behavior in orbit and beyond. And CDG3 responds by emphasizing the need for global cooperation, shared norms, and ethical stewardship across all space activities. That's why CDG3 frames orbital conservation and planetary protection as two sides of the same coin, the same challenge, both requiring responsible, forward-looking acting nuclear propulsion. They're sending tourists into orbit, often without consistent external oversight or shared ethical guidelines. The problem is not innovation, it's the lack of global norms to guide it. When safety, sustainability, and ethics aren't embedded from the very start, we open the door to serious downstream risks. Orbital debris, misuse of dual-use technologies, failure in life-critical systems, and irreversible ecological harm potentially. For example, in 2023, Japan's Astroscale launched an autonomous debris removal satellite that conducted complex maneuvers without real-time human input. It was a technological milestone, but it was one that raised critical questions about liability and operational norms. Nuclear propulsion is another case. The DARPA-led Draco program plans to test this technology in orbit this year. And while it could revolutionize deep space travel, it also presents serious radiological, legal, and accountability concerns for which current oversight is lacking. And then there's True Anomaly, a US company with their Jackal satellite, which is designed for orbital pursuit. It could enable satellite servicing or raise suspicions of surveillance. Without clear shared technology standards like this, these can be easily misinterpreted or misused. CDG4 responds to these challenges by working to establish ethical, safe, and sustainable norms for all space actors, public or private, ensuring that today's R&D, research and development, supports not just capability, but responsibility. And so CDG4 lays out a clear path forward for embedding responsibility directly into the research and development pipeline. First, it emphasizes the role of AI, calling for structured governance from design to deployment. As autonomous systems grow more capable, we must ensure transparency, accountability, and ethical oversight. Secondly, it addresses nuclear propulsion, a promising but high-risk technology. CDG4 advocates for life cycle risk assessments, for strong public disclosure, and international transparency standards to guide its development safely. Third, CDG4 tackles the dual-use dilemma, promoting early-stage risk assessments and proactive dialogue between nations to avoid misinterpretation of sensitive technologies. Fourth, it supports open science by ensuring that publicly funded space research is accessible, interoperable, and equitably shared across global institutions, fostering collaboration and innovation. And finally, CDG4 reinforces safeguards around life-critical systems, calling for ethics review boards and redundancy standards, whether technologies are developed by governments or private actors. And in short, CDG4 doesn't aim to limit innovation, it aims to guide it. It ensures that as we reach farther into the cosmos, we do so with foresight, accountability, and a collective benefit in mind.
Thank you, Tessa. As humanity sets its sights further into the cosmos, crucial questions arise about whose interests are being served and whose voices are being heard. History shows us that grand explorations can sometimes repeat patterns of exclusion. Recent bilateral agreements, like the Artemis Accords, while promoting peaceful exploration, have faced criticism for primarily reflecting Western interests and bypassing multilateral forums. This raises alarms about potential neo-colonial tendencies in space governance, where dominant powers might inadvertently set the rules, potentially extending Earth's colonial patterns beyond our planet. Even Earth-based projects, like the 30-meter telescope on sacred indigenous land in Hawaii, highlight how colonial legacies can persist in space-related science, often sidelining indigenous voices. We must ask ourselves, when we gaze into space, whose eyes do we use, and whose stories are silenced? We must reckon with Earth's untold histories before writing new ones among the stars. This urgent need for a more inclusive approach is precisely why CDG5 was developed: society, heritage, awareness, representation, and equity, or SHARE. The goal aims to synergize SHARE values with space activities to ensure that exploration, policy, and innovation reflect our collective humanity, honor diverse legacies, and actively dismantle systemic inequities. The fundamental rationale for SHARE stems from the recognition that our worldviews, deeply shaped by culture and narratives, directly influence all space activities and reflect existing power imbalances. We simply cannot afford to repeat historical patterns of exclusion, marginalization, and exploitation as humanity extends into space. Preventing space from becoming a domain of neo-colonial expansion requires moving beyond conventional governance models. To achieve this, SHARE outlines key objectives across its 5 pillars. S, for society, aims to ensure space activities benefit all humanity, promoting social responsibility and equitable access, including enhancing the role of social scientists. H, for heritage, focuses on recognizing and protecting historical and cultural legacies linked to space, integrating indigenous knowledge and celestial navigation into policy and science. A, for awareness, seeks to democratize space knowledge through public engagement and outreach, especially to marginalized communities, and bridging interdisciplinary gaps with artistic and cultural elements. R, for representation, is about ensuring all groups, particularly historically marginalized communities, have active voices in decision-making, moving beyond tokenism to active participation in governance and mission planning. And finally, E, for equity, works to actively dismantle systemic disparities by incorporating indigenous, feminist, and decolonial perspectives into policies, ensuring fair access to opportunities and resources, and mandating intersectional impact assessments for missions. While SHARE provides the vital framework for ensuring our expansion into space is equitable and inclusive, this vision must also contend with the rapidly evolving economic realities of the space sector. Imagine this. A young engineer in Nairobi is developing an Earth observation tool to help farmers predict drought. Meanwhile, a small satellite manufacturer in Vietnam is preparing its first launch. Both are full of talent, vision, and potential, yet both are navigating a space economy not built for them. Meanwhile, companies in the US, China, and Europe are building commercial space stations, forming international coalitions, and driving billion-dollar investments. All of them are part of the same global economy, yet they're not playing on equal footing in terms of finances, technology, knowledge, and opportunities. Nonetheless, space is no longer the exclusive domain of a few nations. Over 90 countries have launched satellites, with new actors constantly entering the market. According to the World Economic Forum, the space economy has already surpassed $600 billion and is projected to reach nearly $2 trillion by 2035. It underpins critical services like navigation, communications, Earth observation, and finance. However, this rapid growth also brings risks of exclusion, fragmentation, and policy misalignment. There are deepening divides due to fragmented regulations, uncertain legal frameworks, and opaque licensing systems that stifle innovation and block access. Thus, we arrive at CDG 6, Resilient Space Economy. This is the answer to our challenge. Inspired by Article 1 of the Outer Space Treaty, which states that space must benefit all countries, this goal provides a new economic vision grounded in cooperation, inclusion, and sustainability. This isn't about adding more rules, it's about aligning incentives. CDG 6 focuses on 5 key outcomes. 1, harmonizing policy frameworks. 2, supporting public-private partnerships. 3, strengthening capacity building. 4, ensuring open access to critical infrastructure. And 5, integrating space-derived benefits into sustainable development. We recognize that what's needed is certainty to foster confidence and reduce friction for cross-border investment, and that providing this clarity along with opening new markets is key for commercial engagement. Countries will engage more readily when there are clear benefits, and building space industries in emerging nations through these efforts promises collective gains for all. The very effectiveness of SOC frameworks, in fact, hinges on their legitimacy, which is established through inclusive consultation, active champions, and accessible messaging. This is not just about growing economic gains. It's about creating an economy that is structurally fair, globally engaged, and future-ready. These principles underscore CDG 6's dual goal, to create opportunities for industry while ensuring global equity and sustainability remain core pillars of space economic expansion. This ensures an economy that is structurally fair, globally engaged, and future-ready, where all actors have a seat at the table, have access to opportunity, and have a role in shaping the future. Because a resilient space economy is one where all actors, large and small, public and private, north and south, even east and west, have a seat at the table, have access to opportunity, and a role in shaping the future. CDG 6 is how we ensure that the next $1 trillion in space drives tangible progress here on Earth and leaves no one behind.
Thank you very much, Zoe, for passing me the mic for the remaining 2 cosmic development goals. So as more nations and non-governmental and therefore private entities launch space objects with dual use capabilities, it is now more important than ever to reflect on how we can preserve space as a domain for peace, cooperation, and responsible behavior. Space is a field of innovation, whether for scientific discoveries or commercial purposes, and it's important to ensure its use for peaceful purposes and long-term sustainability for current and future generations. The Cosmic Development Goal, titled Preserving the Use of Space for Peaceful Purposes, or in short, Space for Peace, aims to address exactly this, the fine line between peaceful and military uses of outer space in accordance with international law. It promotes the collective commitment to prevent war in outer space and supports stability, dialogue, shared responsibility for the use of outer space, including Earth's orbits. The Outer Space Treaty, formerly known as the Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, of 1967, also regarded as the Magna Carta of space law, yet the most important of the space law treaties, can be interpreted as a demilitarization treaty, though with certain limitations. So while it prohibits the weapons of mass destruction, supports peaceful uses, and promotes international cooperation and the non-aggressive use of space, the Outer Space Treaty does not ban all the military activities in space. What does it mean? It means that conventional weapons are not explicitly prohibited. Military satellites such as those for remote sensing, intelligence, navigation, communications are not banned. And the treaty allows for the use of military personnel for scientific or peaceful purposes in space. Okay, SDG 7 addresses the growing threat of conflict in space in an era where countries promote military space branches and use space assets to influence war on Earth, for example, have anti-satellite weapon capabilities, where potential misunderstanding or escalation, unfortunately, is constantly growing. The CDG 7 objective, therefore, is to shift global thinking from space as a congested, contested, and competitive environment to space as a domain of stability and mutual benefit for humanity. Also, it has to promote the adoption of responsible and transparent norms of behavior that would be necessary to prevent future escalations of conflicts in space. Supports inclusive, multilateral space governance to ensure the peaceful use of space by all actors, including through the implementation of safety zones. Okay, moving forward, the Cosmic Development Goal, titled Ensuring Open Access to Space Resources by Preventing Monopolization and Enhancing Responsible Behavior through a milestone-based system, or in short, upholding open access to all space resources, right, is the final goal out of a total of 8 goals. Similar to the other goals, this CDG is very timely, providing an innovative solution to a debated topic about ownership of space resources and the interpretation of the non-appropriation principles, safety zones, and benefit sharing. While we aim to emphasize the equitable and sustainable utilization of space resources, this goal was also formulated to create a foundation for further collaborative resource management and technological exchange, therefore preventing the monopolization of the extraction of space resources. In particular, this SDG, CDG 8, is extremely relevant in the context of commercial space activities. Okay, here are a few key points, yes, in the space sectors to consider for this SDG. So national legislation was enacted supporting space mining activities, and we all know about Luxembourg space legislation, US, UAE. Also, according to the Hague Space Resources Working Group, access to and exchange of information is seen as being part of the benefit sharing for space resources, right? So the access to information is part of the benefit sharing. According to the Artemis Accords, safety zones should be temporary and adapt to the changing nature of operations. At United Nations level, at UNOSA, member state representatives were appointed to discuss key issues regarding lunar resource regulation, responsible use, commercial activity, non-appropriation, property rights, sovereignty, and so many more. Now, focusing on the innovative solution of CDG8, so this is where it becomes very important. The objectives are to prevent the full depletion of resources in any dedicated area. A milestone-based extraction cap could be imposed on the predicted resource quantity at the time of access. So, for instance, if an area is predicted to contain a number of tons of materials, an actor may only be able to extract up to a certain level, for example, 30% of that ton within a defined time framework. When a new actor sees access, of course, the 30% limit would then have to be applied to the estimated remaining resources. Open access, therefore, means that sustainable space mining will be subject to certain conditions and is a tool for ethical space governance and a driver of inclusive, long-term benefits, ensuring that space mining advances and in situ resources are shared fairly among all actors. For these objectives to become reality, we need three major things: a registration system for safety zones, a reporting system for space mining activities that will promote transparency, avoid duplication, monitor compliance, right, with open access. And thirdly, introducing the milestone-based extraction cap, both at international and at national level, for preserving availability for future actors and promoting equitable access. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, esteemed ISU faculty, dear colleagues, to conclude this part of the presentation of the Cosmic Development Goals, we just want to emphasize that we have presented you 8 Cosmic Development Goals. These outcomes reflect the team's interdisciplinary, international, and intercultural background. You're right, the 3 ISUIs. While each of them was aimed at offering innovative solutions to pressing technical and policy challenges. Moving forward, I would like to pass the mic to our team to invite you to buckle up and bear with us in our effort to further focus on the implementation roadmap, which is an essential step toward turning these concepts that we have presented into actionable outcomes. Thank you.
So when we talk about equitable access to space, it all sounds pretty inspiring. Like space is this shared resource that belongs to everyone.
But Jillian, wait. When you say that space is for everyone, it brings up the question, shared by who? Who gets access? Who decides? And ultimately, who owns space?
That's right, Amy. Is space something we compete over or something we protect together? Is it a battlefield or is it a commons?
That's where the idea of space as a common pool resource comes in. It's a concept used for things like the atmosphere or the high seas, resources that are so vast, it's hard to exclude people from using them, but still limited enough that they need careful management.
And space fits that definition perfectly. It's huge, yes, but not infinite. And with more countries, companies, and satellites heading to orbit, there's real pressure building up around things like debris, congestion, and resource access.
What makes it even more complex is that governance isn't just about states anymore. Private companies, especially the really powerful ones, are shaping space activity just as much as governments, if not more in some cases.
So we need a new kind of governance, one that isn't just international, but also inclusive of all players, one that is flexible, realistic, and future-facing.
Because if we really believe space is a global commons, we need to treat it like one, with clear rules, shared responsibilities, and a framework that evolves just as fast as the space industry does. Space isn't static, and neither should be its governance. The rapid evolution of the space sector, along with the emergence of new public and private actors, has both interrupted and hastened the cadence of the space sector. The presence of space companies such as SpaceX, Blue Origin, Space BD out of Japan, Skyroot out of India, and Perigee out of South Korea, along with the rapid technological advancement of China and India, and the participation of emerging developing countries, has put pressure on the existing governance structures to encompass all players, both old and new. To respond to this challenge, our team proposes an adaptive governance framework that is anchored within the existing space governance structure. Traditionally applied in the environmental and climate sector, adaptive governance's core principles of flexibility, feedback loops, and multi-stakeholder participation render it suitable for overseeing space as a global common for humankind. This proposed framework highlights the complexity and dynamism of the sector and the multiplicity of actors, namely states, companies, research and academia, and non-governmental organizations. Therefore, adaptive governance provides an alternative to the rigid, traditional treaty-based structures, allowing the employment of iterative processes through experimentation and learning loops. It's important to note that the CDGs are not meant to replace existing international governance frameworks, but are instead meant as a complement to the existing space governance structures, such as the Outer Space Treaty. For a functional governance framework, the developed policies and regulations should be implemented through good faith efforts that promote a normative cascade among participants and be endorsed by current space powers for collective integration. Our research suggests that resource governance systems are socially constructed, and social reality emerges from the interaction between members of a group or society. With an adaptive and normative framework, the CDGs call for a governance without legal enforceability to entice adherence and nurture accountability and transparency, while standardizing space use and exploration.
To ensure the cosmic development goals stay useful and effective over time, we need a dedicated group to oversee them. This group will be responsible for monitoring progress, making adjustments when needed, and helping coordinate everyone involved. But this doesn't mean that we need to create a brand new organization. Instead, the CDGs will be added to the existing UN system, specifically within the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, COPUOS, which already does important work in space governance. What we're suggesting is creating a special working group within COPUOS to focus on the CDGs. This working group will bring together a mix of actors from across the space sector, from national space agencies and government programs to private space companies to academic and research institutions, and even the civil society and public interest groups. By having such a diverse membership, this group can track progress on the CDGs, adjust the goals as the space sector changes, support partnerships between governments and private companies, keep detailed public records to promote transparency and accountability. We're proposing a structure similar to the Hague International Space Resources Governance Working Group, a successful example where a variety of space experts regularly meet to refine best practices, build shared standards, and track progress. The group will also publish regular progress reports and offer practical recommendations to help members follow the CDGs and stay aligned with the community's shared vision. Importantly, this process would follow what's called polycentric decision-making. That just means decision-making won't come from just one central power. It would come from many different voices across the space community. For example, private companies can share their views and offer expert advice, which is different from how private actors participate in the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, conferences. In those settings, private actors often contribute as observers, sharing their technical knowledge and shaping the conversation through their national representatives. With our framework, we are giving everyone the opportunity to voice their opinion without intermediaries. Finally, and this is a key point, non-government actors won't be on the sidelines. They'll have an active role in shaping and implementing the CDGs. Private companies and civil society are already major players in space, and their influence is only growing. But by fully including them in the decision-making process, not just giving them token roles, we can keep the system agile and efficient. This will help speed up review cycles, feedback, and updates to the CDGs as new challenges and opportunities arise. The Cosmic Development Goals are designed to be flexible and voluntary. That means any country, company, or organization working in space can choose to adopt them, and when they do, they officially become part of the CDG community. By joining, they commit to 4 things. They will follow all 8 CDGs, not pick and choose which one they like, using the shared CDG metrics to track their progress, providing a timeline for how and when they plan to start applying the goals in their work, and sharing knowledge and resources, whether that's through training programs, technology transfer, scholarships, or creating shared standards for how space activities are done. The more established space actors, like major space agencies or large private companies, can set the example. Their leadership encourages other nations and organizations, especially newer space players, to join in. It's about building a global, cooperative approach to space. Importantly, this isn't about strict rules or punishments. Instead, the CDGs rely on positive incentives. Joining the CDG community shows that a world that you're committed to responsible, sustainable, and inclusive space exploration. That builds trust, open doors for partnerships, attracts investments, and makes collaboration easier, especially for emerging space nations and companies looking to grow. But what happens if someone joins and doesn't follow through? There are no fines or penalties. Instead, their name is added to a non-compliance list, which is publicly available. It works as a form of peer pressure, encouraging accountability through reputation rather than punishment. No one wants to be seen as ignoring the shared principles that help keep space safe and fair for everyone.
To make sure this process works and keeps working as space evolves, we've built in a system called MEAL, which stands for Monitoring, Evaluation, Accountability, and Learning. Here's how it works. Every CDG member submits a short annual report explaining their progress, challenges, and next steps. That information is shared on public dashboards, so everyone, from governments to students, can track how the goals are being implemented in real time. An independent, multi-stakeholder audit group reviews these reports, does site visits when needed, and brings in outside experts to ensure everything stays fair and transparent. And finally, every 4 years, the entire CDG community comes together to review progress, update the goals if needed, and adapt to new realities, whether that's asteroid mining, satellite mega constellations, or technologies we can't yet predict. The space sector is evolving fast, and this framework helps space governance evolve with it. It keeps the CDGs flexible, practical, and community-driven, so we can work together to ensure space remains a place of opportunity, safety, and cooperation for all.
Now, this might all sound a bit abstract, so let's bring it to life with an example. Amy, let's say a new country, let's call it Aurora, decides they want to join the space sector.
Ah, yes, Aurora. Our ambitious, hypothetical, emerging space nation. They're launching their first satellite, building partnerships, and realizing they want to do this responsibly. But they also want visibility and credibility on the international stage.
Exactly. So Aurora decides to adopt the Cosmic Development Goals. The first thing they do is to align their space policies with all 8 CDGs. Everything from sustainability to inclusivity, and they set a realistic timeline for implementation.
And because they're now part of the CDG community, they gain access to knowledge-sharing networks, including technical expertise, regulatory support, and even capacity-building programs from more established space actors.
Meanwhile, they also commit to transparent reporting through the MEAL framework, that's monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning. Aurora submits annual progress updates, contributes to public dashboards, and participates in the 4-year review process.
The beauty of this is there's no heavy-handed enforcement. It's all about building trust, sharing knowledge, and encouraging accountability through collaboration, not punishment.
And if the sector shifts, say lunar mining suddenly takes off, the CDG working group can update the goals and metrics. Aurora, along with every other member, has a seat at the table to adapt together.
In short, the CDG implementation plan isn't a rigid rulebook. It's a living, evolving framework designed to keep space governance as dynamic as the space sector itself. When we started working on how to put the Cosmic Development Goals, or CDGs, into action, one thing became clear. Space governance isn't decided by just one group. It's shaped by a wide mix of players, from governments to businesses, researchers to community groups. First, you have the official international organizations that help set rules for how space is used. These include ANUSA, the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs; COPUOS, the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space; the International Telecommunications Union, or ITU, which helps coordinate satellite orbits and radio signals; and the Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee, which takes the growing challenge of space junk. These groups work together to set norms, encourage cooperation between countries, and manage cross-border challenges in space. But they're not alone. The private sector is growing fast, and groups like the International Astronautical Federation help bring together businesses, engineers, and scientists to shape the future of space. Academia also plays a big role. For example, the European Space Policy Institute provides in-depth research that helps guide long-term decisions on space governance. Interestingly, some groups that aren't space-focused at all have a major impact too. Organizations like the World Health Organization and the International Organization for Standardization, or ISO, influence global safety, health, and technical standards, all of which now matter in space. We also looked beyond space for inspiration. Governance models like the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which guides how countries share and protect the oceans, offer useful examples of how we might manage space as a shared global resource.
Making the CDGs work isn't just about good ideas. It's about making sure people understand them, believe in them, and act on them. That's why we've built a communication and outreach plan with 4 simple goals. First, to raise awareness. Who are the CDGs for? What are they, and why do they matter? We want to inspire adoption and action. We want to encourage key players to use the CDGs in their work. Third is to engage and get feedback. We have to show that the CDGs are flexible and will evolve over time. And last is to improve through iteration. We want to use feedback to update and strengthen the CDGs as the space sector grows. Of course, space is a global issue with many different groups involved. So how we talk about the CDGs need to change depending on the audience. For governments and diplomats, we'll show how the CDGs connect to global policies and can promote peace, stability, and cooperation. This includes briefings, reports, and presenting at major UN forums like COPUOS, the UN General Assembly, or the World Space Forum.
For the commercial space sector, we'll explain how adopting the CDGs boosts reputation and reduces risk. Think clear industry guidelines, CDG-related reports, and presence at top events like the International Astronautical Congress or Space Symposium.
For academics and researchers, the CDGs will show up in space policy journals, data platforms, and research collaborations, giving the CDGs credibility and encouraging fresh ideas.
For NGOs and civil society, we'll focus on the human side, sustainability, ethics, peace, and global justice. That means workshops, webinars, and direct conversations with groups that care about these values.
And for young people, educators, and indigenous communities, we'll keep the language simple, clear, and relevant to everyday life. The CDGs can be part of school lessons, community workshops, and of course, engaging content on social media platforms where younger generations tend to spend their time. We also plan to create a central online platform where everyone, from policymakers to students, can access easy-to-understand materials, videos, presentations, brochures like the one you have in front of you, and even real-time updates about the CDG community. By using plain language, diverse channels, and targeted messaging, this plan makes sure that the CDGs aren't just documents gathering dust, they become part of everyday conversations and how we explore, use, and protect space.
All right, so now we're nearing the end. We're going to go over our conclusions and recommendations. So taken together, the 8 cosmic development goals form more than just a policy initiative. They present a foundation for humanity's collective presence in space at a moment of global transformation. As space activity expands across sectors and borders, the CDGs help to define how that expansion can be directed toward the common good. These goals are built on 6 core principles: transparency, diversity, accountability, adaptability, opportunity, and sustainability. And they reflect a belief that space activities should not be governed in isolation, but should be aligned with the developmental, ethical, and humanitarian goals that we pursue here on Earth. This is about ensuring that our expansion into the cosmos reinforces progress here at home. They align space governance with Earth's ethical and humanitarian objectives, extending our global commitments to peace, human rights, and sustainable development into the space domain. The CDGs call for all voices to be heard: governments, private actors, academic institutions, civil society, the public, for every stakeholder to commit to turning these goals from abstract aspirations into measurable outcomes. These inclusive, multi-stakeholder approaches is not just aspirational, it is essential. Importantly, the CDGs are not static. They are a living framework designed to evolve in response to new technologies, new actors, new risks, and their flexibility and their openness is a feature. It's not a flaw. It allows the CDGs to remain relevant, credible, and truly global. As we look to a future shaped by lunar outposts, by Martian exploration, by massive mega constellations, we must decide whether space will be a realm of competition and exclusion or one of cooperation and stewardship. The CDGs endorse the latter, not just as an ideal, but as a necessary path forward. Ultimately, the CDGs offer a call for action to shape a future for space that is peaceful, equitable, and sustainable. If we rise to meet this moment together, these goals can help to ensure that our efforts in space serve not only technological progress, but also the enduring values that we have here on Earth. So to make the CDGs more than just a vision, we need strategic action from every sector. Governments should embed the CDGs into national strategies and regulatory frameworks. Private space actors are urged to align innovation with CDG principles, making ethics and sustainability core to design and not afterthoughts. International organizations must facilitate coordination and ensure inclusive participation, especially by supporting capacity building in emerging space nations. Academia must continue developing ethical frameworks, supporting independent monitoring, and preparing the next generation of space leaders. Civil society must not be sidelined. It plays a vital role in promoting transparency, accountability, and making sure the public concerns shape space policy. The CDGs are voluntary, but their legitimacy will depend on shared engagement across all levels. Number two, the CDGs were designed as a flexible structure, one that supports adaptive implementation and encourages participation from both established and emerging actors. Maintaining that flexibility is also essential for long-term relevance and uptake. Number three, we recommend further research to map how CDG targets apply across the entire space economy value chain, from launch services to satellite operations and data applications. This will help to identify gaps, best practices, and opportunities for sector-specific alignment with CDG goals. Our own project faced some time constraints that limited outreach to non-space communities. Further efforts must include broader consultation with non-space actors, with experts, with indigenous communities, and stakeholders from non-spacefaring nations. Public trust and legitimacy hinge on their global inclusion. Number five, we also propose the development of an urgency matrix, a prioritization tool to identify time-sensitive global challenges that space assets can help address in the CDGs too. And finally, we recommend exploring the creation of a formal coordination mechanism, possibly through a UN working group or an independent international body to oversee the CDGs. This group would guide implementation, learning about and indulging in all that the space sector has to offer. We were spoiled with our exploitation of the knowledge from Dr. Ian Docks, a medical doctor from Mexico, who was the primary researcher and writer for CDG-1 on human health and safety. One of the presenters today, Amy McDowell from the United States, and Harry Tabi Nadip from Cameroon, collaboratively worked on researching the expansive information making up CDG-2 on collaboration and cooperation within the space sector and other sectors. And also, Harry, thank you for co-heading our community and engagement team, alongside Charlotte Bunch, also from the United States. Charlie, along with our deputy design lead, Natasha Naomi Shamugam from Malaysia, who both worked on CDG-3, exploring efforts of orbital conservation and planetary protection. Marta Cid Lopez from Spain, and myself, Tessa Rankin, I'm from the US and Australia, endeavored to understand the implications of responsible R&D and AI and nuclear propulsion for CDG-4. We have Marta also to thank for organizing our reaching out to esteemed experts in the field. Our amazing project manager, Julian Chin from Singapore, and design lead Zoe Hughes from the US creatively synthesized CDG-5 as the acronym SHARE. Our deputy project manager, Nikhil Hubali from India, and Irive Faustine Karesira from Rwanda took on the feat of understanding the complex space economy value chain discussed in CDG-6, and Faustine also helped us dig through all the policy-heavy content for our policy research team. Michael Sandriza, or Mike, as we know him, from Austria, and myself worked through the complicated notion of peace within the space sector to establish CDG-7, aiming to preserve the use of space for peaceful purposes. And finally, another one of our presenters, Claudio Mihai Taitu from Romania, and our awesome editor-in-chief, Jerry Yao from the Philippines, who's unfortunately not able to be here today, are to thank for tackling the growing demand and curiosity about space resources discussed in CDG 8. Thank you all so much for your hard work. I couldn't imagine this project without you. And so, to conclude, thank you all for listening to our presentation on the Cosmic Development Goals, and we hope that this inspires you to take part with us in building a more inclusive and sustainable future in space.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for this engaging presentation. We're now moving into the Q&A part of this session, and we will begin by allowing the resident faculty to ask any questions they might have, and then we'll move on to the chat, which I'm monitoring, where we already have one question. But before I abuse my powers as chair, the other faculty members, this is your opportunity to ask any questions. Now pass the microphone.
Looks, my colleagues are a bit shy today. I'm not used to it. Now, my congratulations as well. I've seen many presentations. This was a very good one. Very good transitions, and I really liked it. I have one, in fact, I have two questions, but one that really struck me is that in the implementation, you mentioned that the CDGs, and you use a very good wording, are good faith efforts. Yeah. So we start with that, good faith efforts. And then I see the CDG 7, talking about peace. Is good faith efforts from an international law perspective strong enough? Does this need a treaty or something stronger than a good faith effort?
Thank you for the question. I might hand this over to Faustine, who was our policy lead, to take over the answering.
Thank you. I have lost my voice, so I'm so sorry if I speak very low. But yes, thank you for your question. But as we have mentioned, we are looking CDGs as soft laws. We are a normative structure-based policy framework. Yes, we are urging all the stakeholders, all multi-stakeholders of the CDGs to adopt the CDGs through good faith. And we are also urging everyone to also adhere to the respectful, peaceful use of space. Yes, in this current geopolitical dynamic, a treaty would be nice. But as we have seen, once we make things harder or more punitive, it tends to, let's say, explode on us, if I may use that word. So yeah, as a start, we want a good faith approach. But as we move on, as we have said, it's an adaptive framework. We will see how we can include that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very correct answer. Treaties will be very difficult at this moment, as we all know. So I like your soft approach, but I wanted to stress it that the ultimate goal should be a treaty, in my opinion. But that's very, very well explained from your side. Thank you.
Thanks. Very nice presentation. I'd like to follow up. I think Professor Peter's question is about policymakers, decision makers. I would like to go into the field of academia, maybe. So, you're referring to goals like, having space benefiting for all, and kind of make me think of taxation, like fair taxation. It's a nice idea. Everybody is on board for that, but actually no, or it doesn't mean the same for everyone. So I wonder, did you meet in your research, because I don't think you touched upon it, theorists, researchers who argue that actually, space for all is actually not the right thing to do, and there are other principles that matters more than that. Maybe this is a question that Dr. Fay would ask better.
Maybe I can step in to answer this one. So yes, we do use the term space for all, and we did actually this was a very much debated term to use during our research process, because obviously space for all, can we really ensure that space benefits all? We came to the conclusion that within the goals itself, not all goals will benefit all members of humanity. But in overall, there will be some benefits that go back to each section of humanity. Not necessarily one goal will, because obviously there will be some challenges, especially if we looked at things like the goal 5, share. That in itself has a lot of underlying issues that needs to be tackled, and like we mentioned, a lot of it sometimes is how do we prevent things from getting worse rather than trying to improve the situation or trying to find a solution to make things better. So when we use the term space for all here, it's not really that every goal is to benefit everyone, but that everyone can benefit from the CDGs in some way or the other.
This is what I question actually, so maybe I misexplained, but it's just an example, space for all. I think in general you get very generous principles, and that's nice, you know, I'm on board with it. My point is that maybe not everybody is on board with that, and there may be people who, you know, argue that, you know, again, like as an example, fair taxation is not what matters. What matters is to reward individual performance. This is what matters. And I wonder whether out there are people who said, you know, space for all is not what matters. What matters is to reward, I don't know, most efficient nations or companies, and you know, humanity, as an example.
So to address that question, Professor, so when we were interacting with some of the experts from industry specifically, what they mentioned was they're not against of some kind of soft laws and normative frameworks, but what they are looking for is some kind of certainty. If it helps them explore new markets and bring in more customers while bringing certainty to how they operate across the global you know, industry area, and also there is clear regulations, like there's no fragmentations in the regulations, they're open to, you know, adhere to these kind of you know, policies and the frameworks. And also what we said is there's a peer pressure. For example, if there is a standardization practice that's going in the industry, for example, space tourism, each company follows a different strategy to, you know, take the tourists and take them to the space, you know, low Earth orbit or the suborbital flights. So if we can have a peer pressure to follow that kind of, you know, safety measures for everyone, we said based on this peer pressure, everyone wants to, you know, come on board and then follow that. Otherwise, they will be put on a non-compliance list, and then it hurts their reputation in the industry. So it's like ISO certification. If you don't have ISO certification for a company, it hurts their you know, marketing strategy when they go out in the industry. So similar to that, we have some kind of you know, strategies or like methods that we have implemented in the policy structure across all the CDGs that would not just take care of one particular stakeholder, but it addresses like multi-stakeholder approach, which would not only help them follow the CDGs, but also it benefits them, you know, by adhering to them. So we say that it will help you further your actions, like whatever you're trying to achieve out of space as a whole.
That's an interesting information coming from the industry. I would like just two small points. One that I kind of feel bad about because it comes a bit late, but I wonder if you studied or considered a bit what the effort of ESA regarding the responsible space sector statement. That's you know, touches on some of what you are interested in. It's just a small part, and that's also a bit of a difficult endeavor that they started, and that's just moving around. And also, it is not it's not a treaty. You know, there's no reporting or surveillance of the signatories. So that may be something to consider, maybe for the IAC presentation. And finally, slide 12, I'm not sure who designed that, but no, the solar system is not rotating as a solid body. Don't put that in your presentation.
Congratulations to everyone. I think that the presentation is actually well anchored into the structure of today's international law. So I think that's great, and that's a very good point. And especially I'd like to push that a little bit further. International law is, I would say, practical. That's some kind of soft law. countries, in good faith or bad faith, do whatever they want. Let's assume that today's my lucky day. I'm the one taking over Donald Trump or Xi Jinping. And I'd like to tell you, okay, I like your CDGs, I'll bite. But I cannot have 165 recommendations implemented right now. Give me 5. Which ones? Which are the 5 recommendations you would implement as a priority in the context of your research over the past months? Which one would you prioritize?
Well, right now we have formulated the CDGs as 8 overarching goals, of which within every goal has a different number of metrics that we have come up with that we think have some kind of defensible means of measuring, or a feasible way of measuring, rather. So that's where that 165 metrics come from. But right now, we believe that the CDGs should be subscribed to with all 8 goals in mind. And so if somebody is not willing to take on all 8 goals, it kind of undermines the whole effort that we are going for, because we believe that all 8 areas that we have identified within all 8 goals are important for establishing a foothold in every aspect of the space industry. But we're also open to changing things. The CDGs are designed to be very flexible. And so if certain metrics are not considered to be ideal, perhaps they can be up for discussion to either alter or change. We talked about having a 4-year review period, or even that could be changed depending on which body wanted to implement them. So we would say that, you know, there's not 5 metrics that we think would be right to adopt. If you want to subscribe to the CDGs, it's all 8, of which the metrics themselves can be discussed in their implementation.
Additionally, within those metrics, we have short-term, mid-term, and long-term metrics. So of course, we would focus on the short-term metrics first as we make plans in the mid and long. And part of that annual progress report is the implementation plan. It's not feasible to think that any one agency or company or whatever would be able to implement all of them right off the bat. So instead, once they adopt it, their annual report would include, here's what we've been working on this year, here's what we plan to work on next year, and in the future, in order to eventually implement all of them. But that is a long-term, if you looked at our timeline, some of those long-term implementation metrics were 40 plus years. So you have a while. You're good.
Thank you.
So first of all, congratulations. It was really a great presentation, as Walter said. So first of all, I wanted to say, because it's a lot of work. So I would like to build upon what we just discussed in the implementation, and I was really curious to hear more about your visiting team that would go and kind of check on the efforts of the nation. So if you could elaborate on that. And also I was wondering about that list, how you came up with the idea that the countries would be willing to come on a list of non-compliant. I'm not sure about that, if that would be feasible. That would cause, I think it's already hard to see the nations did not already disclose enough information when they registered their objects. And there is a heavy legal procedure surrounding that, and it's binding, and still a lot of nations are not really willing to put this information. So I'm not sure about the non-compliance list. But so these were my questions.
So I'll start with your second question about being willing to enter into the CDG community with the repercussion of possibly being placed on this list. Like Faustine mentioned earlier, it's a soft law. Dr. Peters mentioned about eventually wanting a treaty that would be a bit of a tougher framework. And yes, that is an ultimate goal, but in the geopolitical arena of today, it does not appear that that's going to be a feasibility. So therefore, what are our options? What can we employ to have some compliance amongst those that want to come on? So we want to encourage actors to sign on to the CDGs. But there does have to be some sort of, how do we keep you honest with what it is that you are doing? How do we keep you involved in the CDG community? That's when we came up with the non-compliance list, to where it's, like Nikhil was mentioning, it's peer pressure related across the board, because many governments don't necessarily want to be put on the list because they want to be known as governments that want to work with others. Notice I mentioned, many, most, not all. Then also you have your corporations that, like Nikhil mentioned, with space tourism. If you're not in compliance with all these standards, it's going to be pretty well advertised, and your eventual clients are going to know that you are not upholding your end of the bargain. If I'm a space tourist, I'm going to pick somebody who's been going with the protocols rather than someone who's doing something on their own. So like we said, it's also adaptive, to where every 4 years we get together, like the ITU gets together, and they plan their agenda ahead. And if this is something that is not working, or we need something that is more demanding, then we can put that on the list. As for the audit group that will come around, the audit groups can be both internal and external. So each of the community members can have their own internal auditing group as part of that progress report. And then an external auditing group can be made up of experts that are either maybe part of the working group, or possibly experts that have been brought on by those in the working group, or those that have been elected to that position. So it's more of a going through not only the reports, but also just doing some research, some backup. What is in the reports, is that true? Did they actually include the facts, or is it perhaps made up?
Okay, I was wondering, did you consider the compendium of space debris mitigation instruments?
Yeah, the standardization.
Yeah, so just my feedback about that list, I think that how this works is that it's a kind of best practice followers list more than the non-compliant, the bad behavior list. So I think if I were you, I would kind of go into that direction of rewarding the good practitioners more than pushing for the bad behaviors.
No, I agree with you. Like pushing, along with the non-punitive, non-compliance list, I think we should have a compliance as well, which rewards people who are following it. But also, as we were talking about the regulatory bodies, we have the IADC and the other regulatory bodies that takes into consideration the planetary protection, and of course, like with COSPAR, space debris mitigation as well. So all those regulatory bodies are in our consideration, and we will implement. And I think in the short term that we mentioned, the first 10 years, it's where we get on board of all the actors, different actors, to subscribe to the CDG framework, and also have a review cycle, so that the metrics that we have right now, it's more of a suggestive, but then this period gives us a way to evaluate with the actors, have those discussions and set realistic metrics, qualitative or quantitative, for us to be able to go into that 40-year long-term goals. Yeah.
Heartiest congratulations, team CDG. Very well done. I like the skit, by the way. That was neatly done. You mentioned at the start of the presentation structured AI governance. By whom and where?
So, a lot of organizations around the world, even the governments, are trying to incorporate AI governance into their framework, and this is what we are suggesting as well. So, for example, the problem of space debris. We were talking about a lot of objects in the space that are coming up like every year. We are putting like thousands of space objects, and that is one of the AI application that we could definitely use. Right now, there are a lot of personnel sitting in front of the computer monitoring these orbits and then seeing what object is like getting close to another satellite. For example, the satellite that we just mentioned, the time which was very much close to Russian defunct satellite. So AI could be implemented for actively monitoring these objects and their orbits to effectively maneuver them by having an AI implemented solution. And similarly, we have a lot of other applications that could be implemented in the governance aspects as well.
And so to add on to that, you're asking about who would be in charge of that. I think that's an overarching question for all of the CDGs. Who will be able to implement the things that we are asking for? And so part of the subscribing to the CDGs is that if we are calling for structured governance in AI, we are asking for some way to prove that you are implementing AI governance into existing policies, especially down the pipeline, downstream, upstream, for all parts of space technologies. So we don't have the right answer for who will be in charge of that, except that we want it to be some kind of internal governance structures that will hopefully bleed out and bleed into other governance structures as well.
I see. Thank you so much. Again, very well done.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So I understand that this TP came from a larger project that is ongoing here at ISU. Could you explain the relationship of this TP to that project, please?
So this TP is a part of the John Templeton Foundation grant that ISU has received, and it looks at how we can govern. So the question that we had at the start of our presentation, what are the core challenges that we see and will be facing in the future of space exploration, was very much taken from this larger project, and it came about as because we saw that there's a lot of changes in the space economy or the space industry. All these rapid changes have affected how we govern space, or rather the lack of governance in space at the moment, which has brought up multiple issues, as we have highlighted in the presentation, because of rapidly evolving technologies. And as we all know, when it comes to policy and law, it takes a little bit of a longer time than how fast technology evolves. But yes.
Thank you very much. So we have 7 minutes left in this Q&A. That leaves time for me to ask a question and for our chat. So leading on from Professor Woodring's question, you were given a prompt when you first started with this project, and part of that was looking into the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, as a sort of inspiration or lessons learned. So I guess my question is, what did you learn from the SDGs? What did they do well? What did they not do well? What kind of other development frameworks inspired you, or what would you do differently?
So the SDGs very much, our CDGs were very much, if you look at the format of the CDGs, obviously we couldn't show the whole format of each CDG here, but how they're broken down is they come with a introduction, a rationale of the SDGs. There was a lot of countries came with fantastic implementation plans when the SDGs were first released. Within the first 5 years, we saw a lot of progress. And then after that, progress kind of dropped, or to a certain extent, even backtracked on itself. And a lot of this came down to, one, there was a lack of funding mechanisms to support the lesser developed countries. Two was that there were not enough tools to help guide the countries and the participants in executing the SDGs, which is why we've tried to introduce multiple tools, one of which we have actually established and put into our report was the glossary, to try and establish a standardized understanding of different terms. The implementation framework also comes with multiple sets of tools. At the moment, still very fundamental, but can be improved over time to support the growth of these countries, or the growth of the CDGs and the execution of the CDGs. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. So that concludes the faculty sections of questions. We'll move on to the chat. And we have a question from Dr. John Wensween, who's been remotely joining us, president of the International Space University, and I will read that out. So first of all, congratulations on a great and engaging presentation. You provided some great next steps to create education and awareness to a global community. Now the question, beyond the presentation, do you plan to take action and implement the strategies presented? How will you do that? And how can the ISU community help you to accomplish that mission?
So one of the ways that we would like to utilize ISU's brand and its observer status in COPUOS, so the Committee of Peaceful Uses for Outer Space. ISU has observer status in those meetings, and we would like to be able to present the CDGs in that capacity. So for those that are attending that meeting, both in person and they often stream it online, so that we can initially get the CDGs out to this larger community within COPUOS to see who's interested. Are there major space powers that are interested, along with emerging nations that are interested, and also many in industry have observer status in COPUOS as well. So and academia. So it's a good way to get in front of multiple stakeholders at one time, as well as the IAC. So the CDGs have been accepted as an abstract to share a presentation with worldwide global audience of multi-stakeholders in that capacity as well. So those are the two immediate ones that we would like to get synergize on, so that we can go ahead and get it out there and see who's interested.
Thank you. And am I right to assume that this is the end of the questions based on the schedule that was shared with me? So to conclude, thank you very much. And in the words of John further in the chat, thank you, you make me proud, you are the future. Thank you very much.
So let's take a 10-minute break. So next presenter will be TP Mars.
Wait, group photo.
So it is coming up to a quarter to 4 here in Strasbourg, and we return to the second team project, which we refer to as Fertile Mars. And it was inspired directly by a project from 20 years ago called Fertile Moon. And in the case of Fertile Moon, it had to do with in situ lunar resources. And in contrast, this team, composed of 20 individuals, is looking at the potential of in situ resource utilization on Mars. So without further ado, may I pass the floor to TP Mars, but just prior to that, a colleague has just mentioned that we're having some IT glitches. Apparently every 30 minutes the signal wanes. So if this does happen again, please be patient. The signal should return in a few seconds. TP Mars, very, very, very good luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. May I first start by extending my warm thank yous to TP-CDG for your fantastic presentation. We hope that you enjoy our presentation just as much as we did yours. So, my name is Jamal Karaka. I was a project manager for TP Fertile Mars, and today I'll be demonstrating all the work that we've been conducting over the last 10 months. For context, for those of you who are joining us online, the International Space University is a global institution based in Strasbourg, dedicated entirely to space education. Founded in 1987, the university promotes international, intercultural, and interdisciplinary learning, and has a global alumni network in space agencies, industries, and academia. So, Mars was formed about 4.6 billion years ago, about the same time as Earth. In its early history, Mars had active volcanism, suggesting it may have once been more Earth-like. Over time, due to its smaller size and weaker gravity, Mars lost much of its atmosphere, leading to the cold, dry planet that we see today. But through the study of our neighboring planet, we can gain vast knowledge of our own home. We develop technologies that make our lives easier here today, and we can hope to maybe answer the question as to whether we're alone in the universe. Despite how far we have come, space travel remains expensive. It's a high-risk and technologically challenging endeavor. In situ resource utilization, ISRU, also known as living off the land, presents an opportunity to reduce many of these challenges. By using local minerals rather than taking them with us, we can reduce mission costs and prolong mission exploration. Fertile Mars, that I will present here today, is an International Space University project that investigates the potential of Martian iron as an in situ resource. The project examines the scientific and environmental constraints of using iron on Mars and the challenges involved in locating, extracting, and purifying this metal. Today, we will discuss the ethics and policy of the work we've conducted, as well as the scientific and engineering principles that we will cover, and a business and financial analysis. We will end today's session with a conclusion and recommendations for future work and future development. 10 months ago, in October 2024, we started our journey with a literature review. We studied 7 Martian resources that were selected for their ISRU potential. That is water, solar photons for energy generation, explosive material for mining and terraforming, atmospheric compounds for novel applications, radiation protective environments like caves and lava tubes, clay and other Martian minerals, and iron. Iron ranked the highest. Our analysis was conducted based on a set of criteria. We looked at the localization of that material. Where exactly is it on the Martian surface? The abundance. How much of the material exists, and how easy is it for us to access and find it? What does the seasonality of Mars and its change in orbit tell us about how we can find this material? And finally, what is the market use of this material? After conducting this literature analysis, we concluded that iron ranked the highest due to its year-round availability, structural versatility, and resilience to Mars's harsh environment. Once we had identified Mars's most valuable resource, we needed to focus on what we need to do to take the steps to transform this raw material into something usable. Initially, we found that biomining using Shewanella oneidensis offers an efficient, low-impact method for extracting the iron from Martian regolith. This process was then supported, which we'll discuss later, by two AI ML models we developed. A mapping tool to locate iron called GeoFerra, coming from the Greek word geo meaning land, and ferrum from Latin meaning iron, and an extraction tool, Xenoferra, from the Latin xeno meaning alien or unknown. These represent novel contributions to ISRU research. We look at the applications of iron from more obvious tooling and infrastructure to the abstract power and combustion techniques that utilizes iron's chemical properties. But before we go any further into the use of iron, let us discuss the ethics and international policy that exists to protect Mars from exploitation, laying the groundwork for the report and this presentation.
Thank you, Jamal, for the overview of our literature review. My name is Magdalena Trapaglia. I come from Argentina, and with a background in business administration, I took leadership of the ethics and policy team of our project. So when it comes to exploring Mars, we must balance this drive with ethical responsibility, international treaties, and long-term sustainability, protecting areas of scientific interest for future generations. Our project is based on a clear legal and ethical framework. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 remains the core. It prohibits national appropriation, promotes peaceful use of space, and stresses the importance of avoiding harmful contamination. While it doesn't explicitly regulate resource extraction, it provides guiding principles for responsible activity. Complementing this is the US Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act of 2015, which allows companies to extract and own space resources, including iron, in compliance with international law. The Liability Convention also applies. If mining operations cause harm to others, the responsible state must provide compensation. To further ensure transparency and cooperation, the project adopts principles from the Artemis Accords, which promotes interoperability, peaceful purposes, and open communication among space actors. On the ethical side, we strictly follow the Committee of Space Research Planetary Protection Guidelines, COSPAR, to prevent biological contamination of Mars, safeguarding both scientific discovery and planetary integrity. Here is a visual representation of norms hierarchy for space mining, with the top of the pyramid representing the highest priority. Partnership with private actors are critical for success, but with limits. While private companies will contribute technical capabilities, all key decisions and mission controls will remain public. We have adopted a partially finance design develop model. This ensures public ownership and control while drawing on private sector innovation. Now, I would like to give you a quick overview of the ethical considerations guiding our use of technology in this mission, especially regarding AI, cybersecurity, and dual-use technologies. As we integrate AI into space missions, we gain incredible benefits: faster decisions, autonomous navigations, and smarter systems. But these advances come with serious risks. AI can be biased, over-relied upon, and lack transparency, especially dangerous in mission-critical environments like Mars, where life support and navigation systems must not fail. Cyber threats are also rising. AI systems can be hacked, jammed, or manipulated, putting entire missions at risk. As missions rely more on digital infrastructure, even our in-situ resource utilization tools like autonomous robots can become targets or be misused as dual-use technologies. That's why ethical frameworks, modular cybersecurity, and shared accountability are essential. We need robust oversight, constant threat assessment, and international cooperation to ensure AI serves humanity safely, securely, and sustainably. Now I will pass to my colleague Sophie, who will present more about planetary protection ethics.
Thank you, Maggie, for your overview of governance and technology ethics. I'm Sophie Schubert. I'm from Germany, and my background is in business administration. I will continue with planetary protection. Starting with the legal frameworks for planetary protection, we have under binding international law the Outer Space Treaty from 1967, which states that we must avoid harmful contamination of celestial bodies. This is further supported by national guidelines and non-binding international guidelines like the Coast Guard's Planetary Protection Policy. From an ethical standpoint, we face a dilemma because complete planetary protection with zero contamination at all would mean there would be no mission. We therefore looked at concepts defining the potential value of Martian life, meaning does it only hold instrumental value, like scientific value or economic value, or does it also hold non-instrumental value, meaning it has deeper value simply by just existing? We further looked at ethical concerns regarding terraforming. Ethical arguments against terraforming highlight potential irreversible harm, like destroying scientific data, erasing the Martian wilderness, and repeating colonialist patterns. On the other hand, arguments that are advocating for the terraforming of Mars are human survival, human expansion, and the restoration of a planet that could one day host life again. While not initially, in the future, humans will be going to Mars for long-term habitation, which means we have to take the crew's rights and welfare into consideration. On the one hand, crew welfare on Mars raises significant human rights concerns. What happens if an astronaut wants to return but can't? What if someone is born on Mars without ever consenting to live there? These questions challenge our legal and moral frameworks. On the other hand, we are also looking at significant health issues. Psychological strain, isolation, physiological risks, and traumatic accidents must be addressed proactively. Possible solutions range from nature-based habitats to, controversially, also genetic enhancement. Another major concern is intergenerational justice, which asks what must we preserve for those who come after us. Based on Rawls' just savings principle, the answer would be we must protect freedom of choice and life-sustaining resources. So this means any action we take now must not compromise the future. Our mission must be both ethical in this moment and sustainable over time. The key aspects we covered with our ethics sections are international and national legal frameworks, AI and cybersecurity ethics, planetary protection ethics, ensuring crew welfare and rights, and intergenerational justice. And from this, we have come to the conclusion that space exploration will never be ethically neutral. Extracting resources, even if done so sustainably, will always come with moral compromise. Because of this, instead of pretending we can avoid all harm, we commit to clear boundaries and accountability. We limit mining to 3 Martian regions, enforce transparent cybersecurity protocols, and prioritize astronaut safety over economic gain. Importantly, private partners may support this mission, but they will never control it. We move forward with a clear understanding that our actions will carry consequences for science, for society, and for future generations. We do so responsibly with foresight, fairness, and enforceable limits. I will now hand over to my colleague, Maria.
Thank you, Maggie and Sophie from the ethics team for your overview of the ethical ramifications of Martian exploration and for addressing the should we aspects. Now let us discuss the could we aspects. Good afternoon, I'm Maria Volosadov. I'm from Canada and I have a background in astrophysics, and I was the co-lead for TP Mars's science team. The incentive to mine Mars must consider the feasibility of the venture on a scientific and technical scale. The full mining cycle of the various types of Martian ore was parsed into 4 phases, with each phase benefiting from a scientific overview from a physics, chemistry, biology, and planetary sciences perspective, supported by a comprehensive engineering analysis. The localization of Martian ore will focus on identifying large deposits of magnetic iron ore by classifying patches of remnant crustal magnetism, the origin and atmospheric signature of which will be detailed. The mining of pure iron from crude ores will consider another novel technique, which is the use of iron-reducing organisms to bioleach it. This method was considered given its energy efficiency and machinery-independent approach, as well as supporting case studies with Martian regolith simulant that proved the resilience of this bacterium to withstand the Martian environment and the compatibility within a bioreactor. Extraction of the biologically separated samples will rely on magnetic separation techniques. Additional consideration was given to metallic iron quality, storage, and management of biomining byproducts. Finally, applications explored a wide range of uses for the metal, ranging from energy generation to construction and tool making, with the goal of maximizing the usable qualities of this versatile metal. The primary form of iron found on Mars comes in the form of oxide minerals, such as hematite and magnetite. Remote sensing and in situ analysis missions have supported the presence of these minerals, in addition to goethite, jarosite, and iron-bearing silicates like olivine. Chief amongst them was the analysis by the XRISM instrument aboard the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, Omega aboard the Mars Express, and ChemCam aboard the Curiosity rover, as well as SuperCam aboard Perseverance. XRISM's high-resolution hyperspectral imaging allowed for the identification of crystalline hematite via the 1 and 2.5 micrometer absorption bands in the region of Meridiani Planum. Omega, likewise, used spectral imaging to detect magnetite, olivine, and pyroxene over Terra Meridiani and Syrtis Major. ChemCam and alpha particle X-ray spectrometer aboard the Curiosity rover provided confirmation of iron oxide deposits in the Gale crater, while a Raman spectroscope aboard Perseverance identified iron oxides, sulfates, and hydrated silicates in the Jezero crater. These missions validated orbital detections and, through in situ mineralogy, identified sites of past aqueous and lacustrine systems, allowing us to get the lay of the land for ISRU purposes. Mars is known for its frequently occurring dust storms that can cover the entire planet. This can render certain imaging techniques useless. But for this, thermal imaging can pierce through the veil of dust to capture critical data. The thermal emission spectrometer has allowed for the isolation of iron-bearing minerals, using material-specific heat retention or thermal inertia, as you see from this heat plot. A spectral light transport for sand model allowed for the simulation of light interactions with sandy Martian iron-bearing minerals. Furthermore, subsurface radar sounding techniques, such as those applied by MARS's and RIMFAX instruments, reveal the buried layers, which are particularly fascinating from a Martian geological perspective. Given the global abundance of Martian ores, it is nevertheless important to consider the distribution of ferromagnetic iron, yielding a unique geophysical phenomenon that arises even in the absence of a global magnetic field. Remnant crustal magnetism is localized in the southern highlands of Mars, particularly in the region of Terra Sirenum and Cimmeria. It can be viewed as the preservation of early magnetic dynamo activity in the pre-Nokian period. Pioneering work in the field by Dr. Mario Acuna, NASA scientist and former ISU mentor, whose insistence on including a magnetometer aboard the Mars Global Surveyor payload permitted for the extraction of a magnetic field signature, which has linked these magnetic anomalies to the thermoremnant iron-bearing minerals. The absence of magnetization in volcanic regions and in northern latitudes suggests that post-dynamo formation or impact-induced demagnetization created a heat shock surpassing the Curie temperature of iron, resulting in magnetically inactive areas. Mars's geological composition and its unique atmospheric constituents reveal a fascinating phenomenon not unlike that exhibited on Earth, the presence of aurorae. The generation mechanism shares some similarities with terrestrial equivalents. Aurorae form when charged solar particles interact with crustal magnetic mini-magnetospheres, creating regions of locally closed field lines. These trap and funnel electrons into the upper atmosphere, where they collide with CO2 and NO, exciting emissions in the ultraviolet and visible bands. Mars exhibits three distinct auroral morphologies: discrete, proton, and diffuse aurorae, as revealed by the MAVEN, SPICM, and Mars's instruments. With discrete aurorae being the focus here, we identify them as localized magnetic field-aligned emissions resulting from low-energy electron precipitation into regions of strong crustal magnetism. The strongest fields have an occurrence rate of discrete aurorae of 25%, with the emissions being 40 times stronger than anywhere else on the planet, as illustrated in this plot, meaning field strength against frequency of detection. In summary, we see how spatial correlation between the incidence of discrete aurorae, crustal magnetic anomalies, and iron-rich beds suggest a strongly coupled system that can be exploited for ISRU purposes, such as predictive mapping and subsurface deposit localization. I will now pass the floor to my colleague to discuss the next phases.
Thank you, Maria, for the discussion on Martian aurorae and crustal magnetism. Good afternoon, I'm Shraddha from India, and I have a background in aerospace engineering. And we'll now shift our focus to a promising biological agent for Martian ISRU, Schwannella oneidensis. This bacterium is a facultative anaerobe, meaning it thrives in low oxygen environments like Mars. It has a unique ability to transfer electrons to external metal oxides, especially Fe3, via two main mechanisms: direct electron transfer through membrane-bound proteins and mediated transfer using secreted redox reactive compounds. Practically, this allows us to use S oneidensis for bioremediation, reducing harmful iron oxides in Martian regolith and possibly for biomining. But deploying microbes on Mars raises concerns about planetary protection. We must avoid microbial contamination of the Martian environment. To address this, we are looking into sterilization strategies like dry heat microbial reduction, UVC exposure, and containment inspired by industrial systems like coffee roasters. This would be essential for managing waste byproducts like biofilms, carbon dioxide, or heavy metals. So to summarize, we recommend biohybrid reactors using S oneidensis supported by metal organic frameworks to enhance performance and genetic safeguards to ensure containment. Next, I'll explain how we improve their efficiency. To enhance microbial iron reduction on Mars, we begin by improving the surface properties of Martian regolith. Techniques like mechanical milling and laser ablation reduce particle size, increasing bioavailability and accelerating reduction kinetics in some cases by over 21 times compared to larger particles. But physical modification is only one part. The real game changer is in metal organic frameworks, or the MOFs. These crystalline, porous materials offer high surface area, tunable pore sizes, and tailored redox behavior, making them ideal partners for microbial systems. MOFs aren't just useful for microbial enhancement, they also show promise as precursors to metallic iron and could eventually serve as construction material. Their role in Martian ISRU is multifunctional. MOFs can be precipitated from solutions in a hybrid form and used as pretreatment stages before bioreactors. They have been already adopted in space systems. For example, NASA has explored their use in oxygen capture in space cabins. When paired with light-driven reactions, certain MOFs may also degrade perchlorates, a significant benefit when preparing Martian regolith for agriculture. Biohybrid reactors that combine MOFs with bacteria and catalytic materials already exist, especially in wastewater treatment and biohydrogen production. A pilot-scale study using Martian-relevant nitrates and sulfates to synthesize MIL-100 reported a space-time yield between 10 and 120 kilograms per meter cube per day at a projected cost of below $30 per kg. This shows a real promise for scalability in situ Martian resources. In the future, we need to incorporate effluent recycling and waste treatment into reactor designs, but these early numbers suggest that MOFs could become central to Martian ISRU, both as catalysts and as construction materials. Let's now look at the broader picture, extracting and refining the Martian iron. This is critical for enabling structural materials and ISRU systems. Mars presents several challenges: a thin atmosphere, extreme temperature swings, radiation exposure, and highly oxidized perchlorate-rich soils. Key oxides include hematite, magnetite, and geotite, but their behavior differs under Martian conditions. For example, oxidation is limited without oxygen, but brines and sulfates promote redox reactions. Trace gases like NO3- and seasonal water intrusion influences mineral transformation and corrosion. Mechanically, Mars's low gravity reduces stress loads but affects sintering, grain structure, and resilience. Nanocrystalline iron is harder but more brittle. Corroded oxides may be weaker than pure iron, especially over longer durations. So, a deep understanding of Martian iron's chemical and physical behavior is essential for choosing viable refining methods and ensuring structural stability in any future habitat or system. One of the most promising uses of Martian iron is in energy harvesting systems, especially through electromagnetic inductions and triboelectric nanogenerators. Electromagnetic induction, or EMI, takes advantage of localized crustal magnetic anomalies on Mars. When iron-based structural loops experience mechanical vibration or thermal stresses, eddy currents are generated, producing electricity via the Faraday's law. TNGs, or turboelectric nanogenerator, offers a complementary method. These generate power from motion, such as wind, dust storms, or rover movement via charge separation between dissimilar surfaces. Some designs are now self-healing and dust repellent, which is critical in Martian conditions. Even more effective are the hybrid EMI TNG systems. When TNGs generate plasma discharges, they reduce circuit impedance, which increases EMI output by 25%. This hybridization is ideal for power generation under low solar insolation, such as during dusty nights and Martian nights. However, these systems face technical challenges. Abrasive dust particles degrade materials, thermal cycling stresses mechanical joints, and low ambient pressure of approximately 0.6 kilopascal reduces cooling efficiency. So while promising, long-term durability and efficiency remain key engineering concerns. Let's now look at regenerative fuel cell systems, or the RFCS, which offers a robust alternative to solar or kinetic systems. These systems store solar energy by electrolyzing water into hydrogen and oxygen, which are later recombined in a fuel cell to generate electricity, heat, and water. Being in a closed loop, RFCS minimizes water and operates independently of solar availability, making it ideal during Martian nights or global dust storms. There are two main configurations. One is PEM-based systems, which is proton exchange membranes, and SOECs, which is solid oxide electrolyzer cells, which function at low pressure and moderate temperature of 50 to 80 degrees Celsius. Hydrogen storage can be handled via cryogenic tanks or metal hydrides, while thermal control uses aerogels or heat exchangers. Martian iron contributes significantly to the RFCS system. Structurally, it can be used for casings and support. Thermally, it functions as heatsink or radiator. Electromagnetically, it can assist in vibration or heat recovery, and in future applications, we can even develop iron-based nanoelectrodes as low-cost catalytic materials. Compared to EMIs and TNGs, RFCS provides high energy density and longer operational durability, making it ideal for sustaining life support systems and even enabling methane productions through Sabatier reaction. Looking ahead, we aim to develop more efficient electrolyzers, improve hydrogen safety, and integrate RFCS with EMI or TNG for hybrid setups. Nano-engineered Martian iron could serve both structural and functional roles in the next generation of ISRU power systems. Now I'll pass the stage to Fernanda, who will discuss the engineering aspects.
Thank Maria and Strada for introducing us to the phase approach. Well, I'm Fernanda Islas. I'm here on behalf of the engineering team as engineering team lead. I'm from Mexico, from Guadalajara, Mexico, and my background is in engineering, in cybernetic engineering. Here we go. Well, our approach is designed to be a full mining cycle, beginning with identifying resource location and culminating in the practical application of the extracted material on Mars. This strategy leverages the unique Martian environment and integrates innovative biological and engineering solutions to create a sustainable foundation for future human exploration. Our process begins with no heavy machinery, but with life itself. This slide illustrates the core of an extraction strategy, a bioincubator designed for the Martian environment. And the central concept is bioleaching, where we are using microorganisms to efficiently process raw Martian regolith. The key to this process is, as mentioned by the scientific team, is the Shronella oneidensis. This organism has the natural ability to reduce ferric oxide, essentially rust, into metallic iron. This biological transformation is both efficient and requires significantly less machinery than traditional mining methods, making it ideal for resource-constrained missions. Our proposed biomimicry reactor is a self-contained ecosystem. It integrates the bacteria culture with the Martian regolith, creating the perfect condition for iron reduction to occur. And this system is the first step toward creating a self-sustaining industrial process on another world. To ensure the long-term success of our biomining operation, the bioincubator is designed as a synergistic ecosystem. It does not just support our primary iron reducing bacteria, it also cultivates organisms that help create a more fertile Martian environment. We propose introducing cyanobacteria, which are resilient to market conditions. These microbes perform photosynthesis and producing oxygen and biomass. This biomass can be used to enrich the otherwise sterile Martian regolith and improving its quality for potential plant growth. And oxygen is a valuable byproduct for life support for other processes. Furthermore, our strategy addresses the critical need for protection. This system incorporates advanced radiation shielding using materials like boron nitride nanotubes, BNNTs, to protect the delicate biological components from the harsh Martian environment. This integrated approach ensures that our process not only extracts resources, but also contributes possibly to sustainable habitat. Once Shronella oneidensis bacteria has completed its work reducing the iron oxide, the next phase is to separate the valuable metallic iron from the rest of the regolith. For this, our strategy employs two extraction techniques: magnetic separation and electrostatic filtration. On one hand, the magnetic separation technique uses the natural magnetic properties of iron-rich minerals like magnetites to isolate them from Martian regolith. And as shown in the image, the extraction process begins with the bacterial treatment using Shronella oneidensis, which reduces the iron 3 to iron 2, promoting the formation of magnetite. This method is both energy efficient and environmentally friendly. Once magnetite is formed, magnetic extraction becomes possible using a strong neodymium magnets, as illustrated in step 2. This is followed by 3D printing of the extracted material and sintering of extracted material, enable on-demand construction using an in-situ resource. On the other hand, the magnetic and electrostatic filtration employs a low energy and highly efficient technique. The reduction process naturally produces magnetite. We can exploit this property using high-grading magnetic separator. This system applies a magnetic field to the treated regolith, efficiently pulling the iron particles away from the non-magnetic silicate dust and other leftover materials. This method is perfectly suited for the dry Martian environment and can be highly automated, reducing the need for manual oversight. And the remaining treated regolith now cleans from the most of its iron, can also be repurposed for other uses, such as construction material, ensuring that every part of the process contributes to our mission and sustainability. Now I'm passing the floor to Sebastian, that is another key member of the engineering team. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Fernanda, about telling us all about the bioincubator and how to actually extract the iron once it's done its good work. Hello, I am Sebastian Savory. I am from the UK and my background is in astronautical engineering. I will be speaking about power systems and enhanced planetary protection systems. First comes power. Power is perhaps the most critical system for any future Mars base. Without it, everything stops. Currently established systems such as solar power are unreliable due to frequent dust storms and long dark winters. Generators which use fuel imported from Earth are an unsustainable option for cost reasons. We propose that we burn iron. Under the right circumstances, iron will burn just like any other fuel. And this can be used to release enough energy to power a Stirling engine. This has already been shown at the University of Eindhoven, where a 100 kilowatt reactor is currently running and powering a brewery of all things. NASA predicts 40 kilowatts would be sufficient for a lunar base, and this has been extrapolated to estimate our power requirements. But how would this system work? This cycle shows that the system is a closed loop. Firstly, iron is fed into a large bin for collection for use as fuel for the system. Next, an Olds-type elevator screw transports the dust upwards to the dispersion system. Here, entrained flow is used to create a stoichiometric ratio which can burn. At the burners, a spark gap is used to light and maintain the fire in a similar manner to how a spark plug maintains the combustion cycle in an internal combustion engine. This heat is then used as part of a Stirling engine which produces power using electromagnetic induction in much the same way that power stations on Earth do. Finally, the newly made oxide can be given back to our microbes to continue the cycle indefinitely. But what are the potential downsides? Such systems, such as those used at Eindhoven University, are large and heavy. This would make transport to Mars extremely expensive. Additionally, significant strengthening would be required to allow for the reactor to survive transport to Mars at all. Finally, research is needed to better understand how partial gravity changes combustion dynamics and therefore system design. Next up, planetary protection. Planetary protection is one of the most pressing issues regarding a human mission to Mars, and the proposition of using microbes for mining makes this all the harder. The current method for decontaminating spacecraft is known as dry heat microbial reduction, or DHMR. This has long been considered insufficient for certain types of missions, such as those going to areas where life is considered most likely on Mars. This is because it leaves a variety of biomarkers effectively intact, such as DNA, although it does often destroy most of the microbes. In our mission, we will be creating a great deal of finely powdered and very microbe-contaminated waste after ion separation. If this was simply dumped outside, the wind would pick it up and scatter it who knows how far. This would potentially render any future discoveries of biotic molecules on Mars suspect, even with the use of DHMR. Therefore, we propose a thermal UVC hybrid sterilization system. This uses a 350 degrees Celsius drum filled with powdered and processed regolith. As the drum turns, the dust will undergo strong UVC irradiation in the 254 nanometer range, which is best to damage DNA and RNA. One full cycle would take 1 hour. We theorize that this combination will be able to break down even the most temperature-resistant of amino acids, this being aspartic acid, which only begins to degrade at 320 degrees Celsius. But what are the potential drawbacks of the system? Once again, its size and weight. If this system is to be able to process a reasonable amount of regolith at one time, it will be large, so transportation to Mars could be very expensive. Additionally, it would require a large amount of power to heat the drum to 350 degrees for the full hour. Finally, to avoid exposure to the habitat air, which would undo all the work we just did, the machine would require its own mini airlock to dump the contents back outside, which adds complexity to the system. The system does, however, have its upsides. The lack of any consumables, such as sodium hydroxide, for sterilization means no need for resupply. Additionally, it is far faster than simply exposing the dust to the radiation present outside the habitat. And finally, it avoids interfering with other ISRU processes as it does not substantially change the underlying materials. I will now be passing on to my colleague Samina.
Okay, thank you, Seth, for the insight overview. I'm Samina Kafasi, I'm from Greece, and I have a bachelor's degree in physics. And now we will talk about utilization and future application on iron on Mars. With a steady supply of purified Martian iron, we move to utilization phase, which focuses on turning this raw material into functional structures and tools. A cornerstone of our application strategy is additive manufacturing, more commonly known as 3D printing. By using the iron extracted in situ, we can fabricate a wide array of essential items directly on Mars. This includes everything from building components for habitats to mechanical parts for rovers and scientific equipment. The ability to print what is needed, when it's needed, increases mission flexibility and reduces our dependence on costly and time-consuming resupply missions from Earth. This slide shows two primary systems we envision: large gantry-style printers for constructed habitats and more flexi robotic arm printers for creating complex tools and parts with intricate geometries. This technology is fundamental to establishing a truly independent and sustainable presence on Mars. Let's now explore the potential future applications of iron in Martian missions. As previously mentioned, TNGs convert mechanical energy to electrical energy. They are lightweight, flexible, and can harvest energy from motion or vibrations, making them ideal for Mars, where dust and wind serve as natural friction sources. TNGs can be embedded into rover surfaces, habitat walls, or even astronaut suits to power small sensors and communication devices. Future developments may integrate TNGs into 3D printer iron structures, combining mechanical support with energy generation. In addition to passive energy harvesting through TNGs, more robust and continuous power supply solutions like RFCS are also being explored to meet the demanding energy needs of Martian missions. RFCS represent an innovative and sustainable energy solution that operates in two-phase cycle. The first phase is electrolysis. Solar energy powers the splitting of ion-rich water into hydrogen and oxygen. The second phase is fuel cell mode. It recombines them to generate power during sunless periods. This is essentially valuable on Mars, where dust storms can block sunlight for days. On the Martian surface, RFCs find valuable applications. They are capable of supplying continuous power to essential systems such as habitats, life support, and communication infrastructure. However, while RFCS shows great promise, they also come with limitations that must be addressed. These include technical challenges such as hydrogen leakage, the need for cryogenic storage, and the resilience of components under Martian environmental stress. Future advancements may focus on integrating RFCS with solar or nuclear systems, creating robust hybrid power solutions for long-term human presence on Mars. Now, I'm passing the floor to my colleague Rahini.
Thank you, Samina, for giving an overview on tools and future exploration. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Rohini Parthasarathi. I'm from India, and I'm an electrical and electronics engineer by background. And I'm also the co-lead for the science team of TP Mars. So I'm standing here to say about the two AI models we developed, which is Geofera and Xenofera. So as we step into the new era of space exploration, importance of sustainable resource utilization cannot be overstated. Picture this. You are in the harsh Martian environment and you need to find iron fast. So iron is the key to making tools, oxygen, and fuel. But the time is short and the tools are limited. There is no guesswork. So you need to be faster. And now switch the scenes. You are back in lab on Earth. You need quick and virtual answers so that you're testing with the microbes that could help astronauts survive. So these are the real challenges faced by the modern space science, from in situ resource utilization planning to synthetic biology, from robotic pathfinding to microbial survival modeling. In order to address this, we have developed two AI models, which is Xenofera and Geofera. So let us dive into what Xenofera is. So Xenofera is a digital microbial twin survival simulation for microbes. So Xenofera helps us to simulate how a bacteria react in different environments, like in space or polluted areas on Earth. So instead of running many physical lab tests, users can have a fast prediction by entering some basic conditions like temperature, gas, and ion levels. Speaking about the input trainings and model design, the image shows the pipeline of the Geofera model from the start to its end. So the user can enter various phenomena that's needed for the simulation. And the model uses a mixture of data taken from the biological paper and also the test data generated during simulation. So it can simulate even the conditions we haven't tested physically yet. So speaking about the model architecture, we used 3 layers for the Xenofera, which is random forest. So it predicts how much bacteria will it grow, and also the logistic regression to predict if it will survive or not. And last is the long short-term memory. So this is able to simulate how growth changes over the time. So with all these 3 layers, we can have a full picture of how microbe reacts in different situations. But there is a question, what makes Xenophera different from the conventional tools that we have today? Unlike traditional microbiology, which often relies on slow and expensive wet lab iteration, Xenophera enables rapid virtual screening. So scientists can test hundreds of conditions in a matter of minutes, identifying promising strains of further investigation and design safer and more efficient microbial system. So with this simulation design, we can pave a way for AI-guided synthetic biology and a closed-loop habitat engineering. So let me walk you through the dashboard that we created for Xenophera. So here on the Xenophera dashboard, you can see the user starts with the metabolic parameters section on the left. So in this section, we can adjust key microbial process like glucose and pyruvate, how it flows through the TCA cycle and how it contributes to the electron transport. Followed by the Martian condition, where we can tweak the temperature, radiation level, and ion content of the regolith to simulate different Martian environment. Next, the process and reacted parameters. Here we decide how much regolith we want to process and the efficiency we are assuming, and the reactor capacity in liters as well. So last section is the bacterial and kinetic parameters, where the total biomass of the bacteria is calculated along with the total simulation time. So you can see as we make the changes in the settings on the left panel, we can see on the main panel on the dynamic simulation table, the graph changes. So this shows how each metabolite changes for different types of substrates. Finally, there is a simulated ion recovery section that shows how much ion we extracted and how much nutrient is consumed. And also there is an interactive sensitive analysis that let us explore how changing one parameter can affect the whole simulation model. So overall, this dashboard gives us a near real-time customizable simulation on how microbes can extract iron on Mars under varying mission condition. Now, let's talk about the second model, which is GeoFera. So GeoFera is a deep learning model which is created for discovering iron on Mars, like mapping the iron resources on Mars. So this is the Mars molar map of Mars surface, and these are the geological sites on the Martian surface which are known to be iron-rich, which has the iron-rich deposits. So knowing about these locations on Mars helps us to understand the geological history of Mars and the Martian surface how the Martian surface has evolved over the period of time. So also speaking about the model architecture of GeoFera, GeoFera has helped to build a mission to find iron-rich zone, as I mentioned before, on Mars, using satellite images and deep learning. So we use Mars images from NASA HiRISE, which is high resolution image, and CRISM satellite. So these images are pre-processed, contrast is improved, and we focus on wavelength linked to iron, which is 600 nanometer to 1900 nanometer. And the AI model is trained to use these pre-prepared inputs to predict where iron is most likely to be. And then, as for the model architecture, GeoFera uses a convolutional neural network to find iron. It creates heat maps showing the probability of iron in each area. To make the results more reliable, we also compare this real Mars spectral data using a method called spectral angle mapping. Only the matched data will get validated. And speaking about how GeoFera differs from the traditional tools, so unlike conventional platform that requires manual inspection and spectral curve matching, GeoFera automates the entire pipeline discovery. So the current tools which we have like ArcGIS and NV needs manual interpretation, but whereas GeoFera gives us an AI-driven analysis enhanced with scientifically validated prediction. Its speed, consistency, and ability to process large data set in batch mode makes it highly suited for mission design and planning. So let me now walk you all through the GeoFera dashboard demo. So here on GeoFera dashboard, the user starts by selecting their data set from the local mission. One of the key features we added to our dashboard is the ability to select the CRISM data with the known spectral like alunite, smectite, and chloride. So this allows the system to cross-validate it's from the control neural network prediction to the elements we have. So once the folder is set, they can choose which file to analyze, or they can retain the model for the future enhancement. So it is entirely based on the new data inputs. Once a TIFF file is selected from the given data set, the model runs a near real-time analysis and instantly shows whether the image is selected image has the iron rich or not, along with the confidence score. So below the confidence score, you can see the predicted heat map generated from the TIFF image we collected from the instruments of the data set. So after this section, we have a fusion module. This is where GeoFera compares with the iteration with the CRISM spectral mission and CNN prediction. So if both agree, it tools the flag, it validates and matches. So it basically increases the reliability. The next section presents the CRISM spectral curve showing the reflectance peaks across band indices. So it helps the experts to visually confirm material presence. Finally, the dashboard automates the auto-detects the region, for example, like Hellas Planitia and then Terra Serenum, and extracts its latitude and longitude and overlay the prediction over Mars molar terrain map, providing a clear visual cue on where iron is likely to be found on the surface. So this is an end-to-end integration of AI prediction, spectral science, and planetary mapping, which makes GeoFera both accessible and mission relevant. Finally, moving on to the future outlook, as we move forward, the next step is convergence, linking both models like GeoFera and XenoFera into an ecosystem of intelligent tools that can support every stage of space exploration and sustainability. So as for GeoFera, the roadmap includes real-time integration with rover and satellite telemetry, having an AI/ML based onboard and deployed on edge computing modules for offline field use on Mars. And for XenoFera, we aim to build a growing library of microbial strains, simulate microbial communities instead of individual species, and create a feedback loop that combine live sensor data and predictive modeling. So both GeoFera and XenoFera shows how AI speed ups the research and improve decision making and reduce trial and error in both space and Earth environment. So we now have the tools that can predict and simulate, making science faster, smarter, and mission ready. So together, these systems move us from exploration by trial to exploration by prediction, and from biology by experiment to biology by simulation. Thank you. Now I'll pass on the floor to my colleague Trisha to discuss about the business aspects.
Thank you, Rohini, for explaining the use of AI and machine learning in this planetary exploration. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Trisha Rollins. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I'm from Nigeria. As the team lead of the business department, I'll be presenting the 3 elements of our approach and the core strategy, technological leverage, and the business model. Space missions, especially in their earliest phases, are shaped with high uncertainty and incomplete data. To navigate this, we adopted cost estimation frameworks that are currently used by NASA, combining parametric analogy-based models to create a flexible cost baseline. This approach supports our go, no-go decisions and increased confidence in early-stage investments. Our cost model also reflects the reality that upfront costs for Mars operations are high and they enable long-term autonomy. By building infrastructure on Mars, we reduce dependency on costly Earth launches. We applied a deployment strategy that allows us to grow incrementally and reduce risk. Cost planning isn't just financial, it's strategically tied to mission phasing and stakeholder expectations, and also a risk-return model. With public-private collaborations like the NASA's Next Step and frameworks established in Artemis, we are well positioned to blend commercial innovations with institutional support, and therefore lowering our funding barriers. Now, technology is not just a tool, it's our differentiator. Fertile Mars leverages on the insights that even though ISRU is widely acknowledged as essential for interplanetary settlement, most of its existing developments, which are oxygen and water extraction, have only focused on the short-term human survival. Our approach targets a crucial gap in technology, the in-situ extraction and processing of iron for long-term infrastructure. This area remains underdeveloped and is increasingly prioritized by NASA, ESA, and the Luxembourg Space Agency in their long-term roadmaps. The current ISRU technologies hover around the technology level of 3 to 6, with 3 being researched to prove feasibility and 6 being demonstration in relevant environments. Most of these now look integration into the functional missions, and our project is adapting and deploying electromagnetic drills and solar thermal reduction, the 2 methods that are well suited for Martian conditions and are operational for industrial use. In 2018, the Luxembourg Space Agency forecasted a value chain roadmap for space resources. We analyzed this data and several others like the global Moon to Mars technology to prepare for a dual market reduction and with several spin-offs. These systems could have immediate value in remote earth mining, making our investments less speculative and more strategic. By bridging and targeting critical use cases, our mission positions itself not just as a participant in space resource utilization, but as a catalyst for its own commercial breakthrough. Now for the business model, as I earlier stated, Fertile Mars has a dual market business model, one that meets the demand on Mars and also creates possible values on Earth. On Mars, we would provide locally sourced iron for habitats, tools, radiation shielding, and infrastructure. These will support long-duration mission and reduce dependence on Earth-based logistics. This creates support for settlement exploration and in-space manufacturing. On Earth, our value lies in technology and data. From AI-driven terrain mapping and biomining techniques to modular automation systems, we commercialize the tools that would be developed. These technologies could feed into the Earth-based mining, logistic optimization, and remote industrial control system. Now, revenue could be generated through several methods, which are the direct sales of Martian iron to space agencies, the licensing of mining technologies, and possible research partnerships, including Martian environments as a testbed. Our supply chain model integrates sustainability and transparency. Each decision from outsourcing to deployment directly affects the cost and stakeholder value. Now, we recognize that space ventures are very risky, but we are not gambling on a hypothetical future. Our roadmap aligns with the International Space Agenda, including the NASA's Artemis program, ESA's Moon to Mars strategy, and increasing interest in Martian environments. In conclusion, Fertile Mars is more than a science project. It's a business venture that's positioned at the intersection of planetary science and industrial innovation. At this juncture, I would like to pass the floor to our team project manager, Jamal Karaka. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trisha, for that business analysis of our work. So, this brings us to the recommendations and conclusions of our findings. From the findings of our research, we propose recommendations that might further develop our project and form independent projects within their own right. The utilization of Shewanella oneidensis has been covered today. However, engineering a radiation-resistant strain of the bacteria could be a significant advancement. This could be achieved by incorporating key genes from Deinococcus radiodurans using CRISPR. These modifications would help the microbe withstand radiation damage during operation and transport to Mars. However, with that in mind, increased survivability would complicate sterilization and waste management techniques. So, this could only be safely done by also incorporating genetic safeguards. From an ISRU perspective, to better assess the transformation of regolithic iron oxides, experimental timelines for characterization studies should be extended. Reaction and exposure tests using Mars-like soil and atmospheric conditions can simulate long-term changes of iron minerals. We can then monitor these changes, such as those from goethite to magnetite. Additionally, tests on the strength and magnetism under simulated Martian gravity and temperatures can reveal how iron's properties change on Mars. From an ISRU perspective, low-energy methods like sintering rather than smelting offer promising pathways for producing usable iron on Mars. And finally, our business recommendations. A coordinated research and development plan balancing science, readiness with mission design and limitations will be necessary to move ISRU from possible benefit to scalable use. An economic analysis of the Martian ISRU landscape and cost generation model led to 3 key recommendations. Number 1, advance the Fertile Mars work and advance our phased approach using cost estimates based on future lunar ISRU missions. Number 2, utilize public-private partnerships to improve cost efficiency and predictive strategies. And number 3, build a strong ISRU commercial ecosystem guided by the Martian iron ISRU market framework. To conclude, this report has set out a comprehensive overview of the practices and requirements for a successful in situ resource utilization of iron on the surface of Mars. We selected iron based on our literature review, and from this we've developed our approach and 2 novel AI models. The work of the TP upholds the International Space University's interdisciplinary, international, and intercultural values by focusing on the scientific, technical, ethical, and financial concerns of future exploration of Mars. Thank you for your attention here today, and thank you to our advisors who helped us throughout our project. Additionally, I would like to thank the experts that we contacted, and of course, the MSS25 team who were helped all throughout the project. We are a team of 21 students from 14 nations. We thank you here from Strasbourg and from our friend in Bangalore, Indira, as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed that. May I pass the floor to my colleague, Virginia?
Okay. Hello. Thank you. Apparently, I'm up first. So thank you very much for your presentation. My question will be, surprise, surprise, related to ethics and policy. And I guess it's a, yes, I guess it's a two-pronged question. The first part is, what literatures or frameworks have been the most influential to you when you were developing your ethics and policy framework? I know that you mentioned the Outer Space Treaty. I know that you mentioned WALT. So I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that and what kind of concepts guided your discussions around that. And the second question is perhaps not for the policy and ethics team particularly, but for anyone. You may go into your careers and develop things like that. What have you learned in terms of ethics that you're going to take forwards in your careers? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions, Dr. Fay. So to answer your first one on what policies guided our research, I think I'll pass over to Maggie to...
Thank you, Dr. Fay. First, it was a long talk that we had regarding how to frame our research, because there are so many lines of thoughts and also our independent ideas and so on. We ended up framing our research under US, so law-wise and regulations falls under US. That doesn't mean that our project is not viable in other contexts, but I mean the technology and the engineering is independent from that. And our ethics is also independent on that. Like, we established a framework that we felt comfortable with advancing with science. At the same time, we are protecting Martian rights. And that's when the discussion became, what are the Martian rights? So I think there, Sophie had a long reading with multiple papers regarding what's the value of it, and if there is a value, how do we protect it? But yeah, overall, I think that was the idea, and I think we're very comfortable. I don't know, Sophie, if you want to add something else about that.
Yeah, sorry, camera. Like Maggie said, there's quite a few papers we read on it. Like you said, Rawls, Theodore, I forgot his first name, I'm sorry, but regarding the intergenerational justice. And then we looked at quite a different approaches, specifically regarding the value question. So do we have a biocentric approach? Do we have an ecocentric approach? It's just, at the end of the day, a question that I cannot answer what the actual value of Martian life is, of course, but we looked at quite a few approaches, and it's a very interesting discussion.
To answer your second question, I think I might take that one. As an engineer with absolutely no experience with ethics, I think I'm qualified to tell you exactly what I've learned, which is everything. The TP report, the ethics side of things at least, was the most interesting for me to read and to understand, because it was completely abstract, or at least it was completely new to me, I should say. As an engineer, ethics and sustainability is always something that one must think about, but it does occasionally sit on the back seat where really it shouldn't. And that's why we wanted to present the ethics section first in our presentation and similarly in our report. We wanted to make sure that it was front and center. What I think that I learned from that and from ethics and the ethics of ISRU on Mars is that ethics shouldn't be this roadblock and a barrier. It's something that helps us and it's something that guides us, and it makes sure that the changes we make can help not only the future generation, but also us too. So it changed my perspective of sustainability as something, a box to tick, and rather now something that we should actively look and implement if we want to be good engineers and good scientists and good leaders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So pass. Whoop.
Okay, congratulations, first of all, for the presentation. For my end, a question on policy in business, and business has no ethics. Sorry, Yana, a bit of a provocation here, but what about, you mentioned, so you said you took the decision to go through the American lenses. What about the nation of ILRS, so like China and everything, and how would you generate money or business with all these nations in the context of peaceful exploitation of outer space with this project?
Thank you very much for your question. So I will eventually pass over to Trisha to talk about our business model. But just to briefly touch on that first moment about how and why we constrained ourselves to a US-based and US-centric report. Now, when we first started this project, it was very clear that the topic was vast and it could go absolutely anywhere. So when we began talking to advisors, they would always ask the questions, well, okay, from what country are you coming, and from what angle should we look? And we never had an answer. So one of the very first things that we needed to do was to constrain ourselves, which we ended up constraining ourselves to a US-based kind of approach. That was mainly to do with the access to literature. As interesting, as fascinating as ILRS really is, there isn't enough resources out there for us to access. I mean, there is a number of resources, but it is limited. As well as that, access to experts is definitely more limited from that point of view. So to really ensure that our work was relevant and up to date, we wanted to make sure that we were using accessible resources. I'll now pass over to Trisha.
Thank you. You pretty much said what I was about to say. So ILRS, there's little information on it, basically. That's the truth. And initially, we actually had to sit down even with the CDG team to actually figure out like what the plan was, what our idea was, what we thought was the best way to go about it. And I think pretty much we had to go with the US because most of their details are open and accessible. You know, we know the ideas of how much their funding is, how they spend the money, and that was why we had to go with that. It was the best decision, really.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. It was brilliant. I liked it. Yes, but just one contribution I want to make is when you are presenting technical and engineering aspects, maybe to people maybe who do not know about the in-situ resource utilization, it would be much more better if you describe the processes with animations or using simulations or block diagrams so that they can see the process where we are starting until the end. So it will be much more easier for people to understand, because you talked a lot of technicalities like Shraddha and the one who comes after Shraddha was Fernanda, yes. So you talked a lot of technicalities of the processes, right? So it will be difficult if those technicalities are explained in reading than showing a simulation or an animation or a block diagram. so it simplifies things to the audiences. So that's one important point. Then maybe my simple question is, so it's on applications, so we can use this, maybe the extracted ion can be used for constructions or for building life support systems. So I just want to know, like, what are the trade-offs between using this extracted ion for construction versus its use in life support systems.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for the comment. As we look to develop this for conferences and papers, we definitely take on that advice. I really appreciate that. I think when it comes to our application, I think Ege can help us with how the trade-off analysis that we make when it comes to infrastructure and habitat, why we might use iron over maybe regolith or some other application.
Thank you for your question, Dr. Ramson. For the regolith that extracted from by our incubator, we can use it for 3D construction, and also we suggest that we can use it for plant growth. And for the trade-off analysis, maybe we could also discuss with the business team, because it could also affect it by the cost. And we can consider the maybe transportation from Earth, how we can transport some constructions, materials, and our building materials there. So as your question, are you considering the question as in terms of advantage and disadvantage for this
Kind
process?
of like, yes. Where can we best use it? Construction or life supporting system? What are the trade-offs that we can consider?
Oh, actually, I can say that the traded iron has an ultimate compressive strength 4 times than the untreated regolith on Martian surface. So we know that reduced iron can be used as constructed material because it's stronger than the regolith. So it's suitable for 3D printing also. If you want to add something, Sarah.
Well, as Ege mentioned, well, basically the idea of the project is to, the engineering approach was to do something with the leftover regolith. So basically we are approaching construction tools or building material, because the first approach of the project is going to exploration, not a human exploration so far, right now. So at the first step, we consider only construction materials and building tools for future exploration. So right now, for live support, we are not considering a lot of options, but will be a second phase, basically. Yeah.
Okay, am I in the last one? No. Anyway, I just, so my feedback is a little bit different. So the overall presentation, to me, feels like the human element is a little bit lacking. So I know that the topic is about resource utilization, how we will build this infrastructure to extract and to treat the iron. But other than the first few slides about mentioning the ethical aspects, I'm kind of feeling like, where are we in it? How does it impact the workers? Are there going to be any workers? How is it going to impact Earth? You know, all the human aspects. So that's my feedback.
Okay, thank you for your question. I'll pass over to our ethics lead for this answer.
Thank you, Dr. Early. So initially, the reason why we're not touching so much on that aspect right now is because we're in a stage in TP, like TP Mars was focused on the early stage of extracting and iron in Mars, and at a later stage that we will develop in the future, hopefully, we will start considering actually taking humans to Mars. Right now, we are assuming that it's only for rovers and machines. So the labor aspect of that, it's not covered in this report, but we'll definitely look into that in the future. But overall, we covered a lot more in the report regarding crew welfare and so on. Just for a matter of time, and so we couldn't expand further, but we have a whole section dedicated to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just think that it's important to have a little bit of this aspect, because there has been historically a long fighting between the discussion, should we send robots, should we automatize everything, do we actually need astronauts, etc. So that's why I think it should be there. So thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the very clear case study, but I see it as a case study. It's not a full solution, but you describe it well. I have, though, a very, very essential problem with your recommendations. Probably no surprise to some of you on public-private partnership. I think your PPP, public-private partnership approach is wrong. If you say the private sector is invited but has no control, the private sector will not come. We learned that with PPP in Galileo, which was a disaster, and I can give you a whole list of PPPs that failed due to that. If you want to have Elon Musk putting money in your endeavor, you will have to give him the freedom to develop it the way he wants to do it. So I think we will have to be very careful. The coming years, it's very nice to talk about the Artemis Accords, but you should also talk about the Artemis project. The Artemis Accords is a non-binding policy paper, but the Artemis projects will not work with 25% reduction in the NASA budget, with reductions in the ESA budget. We will not have exploration if you're really going to drive your PPP by the public sector. You will have to find more incentives, and here's my question. What is the incentive on this for the private sector?
Okay, thank you very much for your advice and your comments. I think I'll pass over to Hunter to answer your question about how we could incorporate PPP moving forward.
Thank you, Jamal. And so when we're looking at these PPPs, these public-private partnerships, you're exactly right. It does need to come from both directions, so there does need to be buy-in. And specifically, it does kind of need government initiation. So much so is this important that this was identified in that Luxembourg Space Agency study in 2018 of the ISRU value chain. That quote was even included in the report. It so resonated with us. And so that really does play into not only the structure that these might take, that these partnerships might take, or that necessarily these technology development roadmaps might take with things like, with models like the NASA Next Step program. But it also builds on the marketing framework that we developed in this report, which does substantially talk about government source buy-in for these private partners. So while of course this does necessarily require a great deal of autonomy that must be afforded to these organizations, as well as the independence to not only follow this development as they deem appropriate, but in a way that's beneficial to them. And so that's where I think it's important to identify, as we're constraining ourselves to kind of the setting in which we're looking at this, we're not constraining ourselves to the single viewpoint of a single government entity or a specific government entity even. All of this to say, as you very well put, it's nebulous and it's fluid, especially with the news coming out of the States last month. But ideally, the cost estimation and again, the marketing framework that we tried to put together in this report will be somewhat resistant or otherwise tolerant to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and congratulations for a nice presentation.
and say elegant, a bit static maybe. So I just have a couple of questions. So one regarding the remote sensing capacity to detect iron beyond a few millimeters. How does that work? How much do you learn from remote sensing in terms of really quantities of iron?
Okay, from remote sensing, I think Maria is confident taking this question.
Thank you for your question. I will also have the engineers perhaps weigh on this. Radar sounding techniques were able to approximate a layer up to 10 kilometers in depth in certain regions. This is heavily dependent on the terrain and the topography which we're examining. In this case, it is in the Crystal Highlands. However, we do not have a way to confidently assert that this is indeed a layer of pure iron at 10 kilometers, and this is also heavily dependent on the lacustrine and the hydromorphose aspects that were present before. So there's a lot of geological considerations here. Could I also pass this to elaborate, please? Thank you.
Yeah, no, in terms of just detecting iron, the nice thing about our approach is that we're considering multiple detection methods, such as, for example, spectrometers to detect using spectral signatures. So just detecting the different types of iron composites, such as magnetite. And also, we're also using the thermal sensors to take into account the dust storms that are typically frequent on Mars. And so our spectrometers, for example, can't see through them, but with our thermal sensors, then they would be able to.
Okay, thank you. And the second question was already a bit discussed regarding the change of NASA policy. So you talked about budget reduction. What about priorities of the US, and how does that affect maybe your project in a way?
In terms of the priorities of the NASA government with the most recent, of the US government with the most recent bulletin that they released about their funding model. It's important to note that our report was written before that, but we wanted to make sure that our report was in fact future-proof. And so when it comes to priorities, a lot of our engineering and scientific research is agnostic to a particular country. We've looked at a lot of examples of resources that definitely are US-based, but we've also looked at European-based resources. We looked at publications from Southeast Asia and agencies from all across the world. So although we initially constrained ourselves to a US-based approach, we are absolutely not confined to it solely. Definitely changes will have to be made to our PPP model, and I think I'll let the business team touch on that in a moment. But certainly from a technological point of view, we try to make sure that any recommendations that we put forward were, as I say before, agnostic to an institution or to a starter country. So I'll let the business team carry on with that.
Thank you for the question. I think currently the cuts that on the NASA budgets are not affecting the Moon to Mars mission, which is pretty much what we're trying to do. I think it's more affecting the scientific research. I know it would directly affect us because we wouldn't have like maybe regulates accessible to us. But like Jamal said, this project is not specifically for the US. We looked at several agencies, we looked at several opportunities across the world, pretty much. So given what's happening in the world and also in the US, I think the project, like you said, is future-proof. We would be able to go past any possible, wars or issues in the future, I think. Hopefully no wars.
All right, thank you. Who's next? Is it Professor Vottering or Professor Hill? You have to choose.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have access to pass the mic to my colleague.
I will read the question of John later, but John, ask your question.
Okay, we don't have that much time left. Many thanks for the presentation. Good to see you all, both in Strasbourg and in Bangalore. And my question is, pull it up if I may. My question is futuristic. Do you think that Xenophera could come to fruition on Mars during your working lives?
Thank you for that question. I think Rohini is absolutely the most qualified to answer this one.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, it's okay. It's a futuristic question. Do you think that Xenophera could come to realization on Mars during your working lifetime?
I think it's too early to answer that, but then we can achieve at least some like near real-time analysis of that, like based on the analogs conducted here, how we do the human analogs here, it's similar to the Xenophera. So as of now, the entire model is based on how the bacteria reacts in Earth, and also how the Martian environment. It's just a combined analysis of both the thing, like the Martian environment and the bacterial reaction to the Earth environment. So I think with multiple iterations, we can definitely achieve it. I think so, yeah.
Okay, that seems fair enough. As time is a Guinness, I'll pass the mic to Bertrand.
Okay, so after you have answered the question of the faculty, you may want to answer this one. I think that was maybe touched upon, but John wants you to go into more details. Given that no international legal framework currently grants sovereign resource rights on Mars, how would your team propose navigating the inevitable geopolitical tension between commercial exploitation and planetary protection, especially if two rival actors claim overlapping zones of extraction?
Thank you. That's a very good question. And I think that touches on some of the things we covered in ethics. Certainly that what Sophie said, that resource utilization cannot exist in a truly ethically neutral point of view. And at some point we have to take a stand, or at least we have to make some adjustment. So I'll pass over to Maggie to lead this question. Thank you very much.
Bueno, thank you. And yeah, basically we have chosen to follow the US Commercial Act, and that is allowing us in some sort of sense, like it's giving us a legal framework to extract and own resources. And in terms of, following what Jamal was saying, we had a long discussion regarding what our limits were gonna be in terms of ethical and moral boundaries. We also had long discussions with the science and engineering team regarding like what is that thing that could make us stop the mission, or and that's when we set certain boundaries, like only extracting iron in certain areas, and following COSPAR, the Committee of Space Research guidelines as well, to prevent contaminating more than the bare necessary. So I think that was our approach, and I don't know if you have something to add.
So to answer your question about rival actors in terms of the ethics and utilization of our resources, and ultimately if we decide that we constrain ourselves to only 3 areas, and we constrain ourselves to as low as reasonably possible in terms of the amount of iron that we extract, if a rival actor comes in and decides to completely negate that and makes their own decision, then what power and what control do we have over that? Well, I think that comes into play where we notice the limitations of our own research. If someone in the space industry now, if someone wants to go against all sorts of international policy and do whatever they like, then we are maybe at the mercy. But I think this presents an opportunity for maybe a move to collaborate, I think, with CDG. I think in terms of what TP Mars can offer, it's not a framework for how actors should get involved and exactly what the policies are and what we recommend in terms of how we would run a policy profile. It was more of just analysis of what exists out there. And with groups like CDG, we can maybe come together and see how we can not only provide knowledge, but also encourage recommendations moving forward that benefit from their expertise much more in the political background. So in terms of private actors, personally from TP Mars, I don't have a super answer, except that what I would do is acknowledge the brilliance of our classmates and maybe make use of some other work as well. Thank you.
Okay, but believe it or not, the Q&A session has come to a conclusion, and I had a few questions, but we ain't got the time. Just to summarize things, we've seen two very, very different TP presentations this afternoon, but both interesting. I think that's one of the things that impressed us. The other thing that impressed us, I believe, is the sheer volume of work that both teams put into this presentation. You can imagine the hours, the endless hours, you know, over weekends and so on. But the good news is that it has come to a conclusion. And today's a very special day for that reason. All of the hard work that you've done, all of the hard work you've done since October hasn't been in vain. And we hope that this work will be presented perhaps in Sydney at IAC. It's worthy of a platform of that magnitude. So to conclude, thank you so much for your labor. Thank you so much for your blood, sweat, and tears. And you're free.
Thank you.